Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Sheriff Deputy Travis Hawthorne had been with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office for 12 years when the call came in about the missing campers. It was mid-August, and the Arizona desert was experiencing one of its worst heat waves in decades. The thermometer outside the station read 118 degrees Fahrenheit at 3 in the afternoon. "Travis, we got another one," Sheriff Mitchell Barnes said, tossing a folder onto Travis's desk. "Family of 4 went camping in the Superstitions 3 days ago, haven't been heard from since." Travis opened the folder and studied the photos. The Brennan family. Father Kyle, 38, an accountant from Phoenix. Mother Sierra, 35, a school teacher, and their 2 daughters, Amber, 14, and Kendra, 11. They looked like the typical suburban family, clean-cut, smiling, the kind of people who went camping once a year to reconnect with nature. "Their car?" Travis asked. "Found it at the Peralta trailhead yesterday morning. Tents still set up about 2 miles in. Everything's there, sleeping bags, food, water, even their cell phones, but no sign of the family." Travis felt that familiar knot form in his stomach. The Superstition Mountains had a reputation. Every year, hikers went missing in those ancient volcanic peaks east of Phoenix. Some were found days later, dehydrated and disoriented. Others were never found at all. But a whole family vanishing from their campsite? That was different. "Who called it in?" Travis asked. "Kyle's brother. They were supposed to be back Sunday night for a birthday party. When they didn't show, he drove out to check their usual camping spot." Travis stood up, grabbing his hat from the desk. "I'll head out there now. Take Phillips with me." "Already tried Phillips. He's dealing with that situation in Apache Junction. You'll have to take the new guy, Carson." Deputy Blake Carson was fresh out of the academy, 23 years old with barely 3 months on the job. Travis found him in the break room, nervously adjusting his uniform. "Carson, you're with me. Bring extra water and your hiking gear. We're going into the Superstitions." The drive to the Peralta trailhead took 45 minutes. Travis used the time to brief Carson on the Brennan family and the history of disappearances in the area. The younger deputy listened intently, occasionally glancing at the massive rock formations growing larger through the windshield. "How many people go missing out here every year?" Carson asked. "Officially? Maybe 3 or 4. Unofficially? Hard to say. Not everyone gets reported right away. Sometimes we find bodies years later, picked clean by the desert." They pulled into the parking area next to the Brennan's blue Toyota Highlander. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as they gathered their gear. Travis noticed Carson already sweating through his uniform. "First rule of desert searches," Travis said, handing him an extra bottle of water. "Dehydration will kill you faster than anything else out here." The hike to the campsite was brutal in the afternoon heat. The trail wound through stands of saguaro cacti and palo verde trees, climbing steadily into the rocky heights. After an hour of hiking, they spotted the bright orange tent nestled in a small clearing surrounded by massive boulders. Travis approached carefully, hand resting on his sidearm out of habit. "Sheriff's Department. Anyone here?" Silence. The tent was the expensive 4-person model, properly staked and with the rainfly attached despite the lack of rain for months. Travis unzipped the entrance and peered inside. 4 sleeping bags laid out neatly, backpacks propped against the tent walls, a stuffed rabbit that probably belonged to the younger girl. "Check this out," Carson called from behind the tent. Travis joined him and found what had caught the deputy's attention. A camp stove sat on a flat rock, a pot of what looked like dried pasta still sitting on the burner. 4 plates were set out on a camp table, food half-eaten, forks still resting on the plates. "They were in the middle of dinner," Carson said. "Just got up and left?" Travis studied the scene more carefully. No signs of a struggle, no blood, no torn clothing or scattered belongings. Even the family's expensive camera sat undisturbed on the table. "Animals?" Carson suggested. "What animal makes a family of 4 abandon their dinner without knocking over a single plate?" Travis pulled out his radio, trying to raise dispatch but got only static. The mountains were notorious for blocking signals. He'd have to document everything and report back at the trailhead. "Let's search the perimeter," Travis said. "Spiral pattern, 50 yards out." They spent the next hour combing the area around the campsite. Travis was an experienced tracker, having grown up hunting with his father in these same mountains. But the hard-packed desert soil revealed little. No clear footprints leading away from camp. No drag marks. Nothing. As the sun began to sink toward the western peaks, painting the rocks in shades of orange and red, Carson called out from a cluster of boulders about 30 yards from camp. "Deputy Hawthorne, you need to see this." Travis jogged over, finding Carson standing at the entrance to a narrow slot between 2 massive rocks. The younger deputy's face had gone pale. "What is it?" Carson pointed into the shadows between the rocks. Travis pulled out his flashlight and aimed it into the gap. About 10 feet in, something reflected the light, something white. Travis squeezed into the slot, the rock walls pressing close on either side. The temperature dropped immediately in the shade. As he got closer, his light revealed what Carson had spotted: a human hand, pale and motionless, extending from behind a bend in the rock. "Stay here," Travis ordered, drawing his weapon. He sidled deeper into the slot until he could see around the corner. Kyle Brennan sat propped against the rock wall, his eyes wide open, staring at nothing. No visible injuries, no blood, just dead. Travis checked for a pulse, knowing he wouldn't find one. The body was cold despite the desert heat. Rigor mortis had already set in. He'd been dead at least 24 hours. "Carson, radio for backup and the medical examiner," Travis called. "Tell them we have at least one body." "At least one?" Travis didn't answer. He was already searching the narrow canyon for the others. He found Sierra Brennan 20 feet deeper, in the same position as her husband, sitting against the wall, eyes open, no visible trauma. The children were beyond her, arranged the same way: 4 bodies, 4 family members, all sitting in a row in this narrow slot canyon, like they'd walked in here, sat down, and simply died. Travis had seen a lot of death in 12 years with the sheriff's office. Car accidents, domestic violence, drug overdoses. But this was different. This was wrong in a way that made his skin crawl. He photographed everything, then carefully backed out of the slot canyon. Carson was pacing nervously, radio in hand. "Dispatch says they can't get anyone out here until morning," Carson said. "They want us to secure the scene and wait." "We're not waiting here overnight," Travis said. "We mark the location, seal it off, and come back at first light with a full team." They strung crime scene tape across the entrance to the slot canyon and around the campsite. As they worked, the sun disappeared behind the mountains, plunging the desert into darkness. Travis noticed Carson jumping at every sound: the call of a coyote, the rustle of wind through the Palo Verde trees. "What do you think happened to them?" Carson asked as they hiked back to their vehicle by flashlight. "I don't know," Travis admitted. "But I've never seen anything like it." They reached the parking area just after 9 p.m. Travis was about to get in the car when he noticed something that hadn't been there before. Another vehicle, a beat-up Ford pickup, parked at the far end of the lot. No lights, no one visible inside. "Stay here," Travis told Carson, approaching the truck carefully. The cab was empty, but the engine was still warm. Fresh footprints led from the truck toward the trail, disappearing into the darkness. Travis memorized the license plate and returned to Carson. "Someone else go up the trail?" Carson asked. "Maybe. Let's get out of here." They drove back to the station in silence. Travis couldn't shake the image of the Brennan family, sitting in that narrow canyon like they were waiting for something. Or someone. The next morning, Travis led a team of 6 deputies and the medical examiner back to the site. The slot canyon was just as they'd left it, the bodies unmoved. But something else had changed. On the rock wall above where Kyle Brennan sat, someone had carved 5 words into the stone. Fresh cuts made sometime during the night. They saw what they shouldn't. Dr. Patricia Moss, the medical examiner, spent 3 hours examining the bodies in place before they were removed. Her preliminary assessment was baffling. No wounds, no signs of poisoning, no indication of environmental factors like heat stroke or dehydration, she told Travis. "If I had to guess, I'd say they all suffered massive cardiac arrest simultaneously, but that's impossible. What about drugs? Some kind of gas. I'll run toxicology, but I doubt we'll find anything. Whatever killed them, it's not something I've seen before." As the bodies were being loaded for transport, Deputy Phillips called Travis over to the campsite. "Found something weird in the tent." Inside, Phillips showed him a notebook that had been in Kyle Brennan's backpack. Most of it contained typical vacation notes, mileage, expenses, trail conditions. But the last entry, dated 3 days ago, was different. August 14th, 10:47 p.m., strange lights on the ridge above camp. Not flashlights, too bright, too steady. Sierra thinks it's other campers, but there's no one else on the trail registry. Girls are scared. Moving deeper into the rocks might have been a mistake. Someone's been watching us. I can feel it. If something happens to us, tell Mom we loved. The entry ended mid-sentence. Travis spent the next week investigating the Brennan deaths. The truck from the parking lot belonged to a local man named Shane Briggs, a 60-year-old hermit who lived in a trailer on the edge of the wilderness. When Travis tracked him down, Shane claimed he'd been checking his illegal deer traps that night, nothing more. But something in his eyes, a nervousness that went beyond normal police anxiety, told Travis there was more to the story. "You ever see lights up in the superstitions at night?" Travis asked. Shane's face went white. "I don't go up there at night anymore." "Anymore?" "Not for 10 years, not since—" He stopped himself. "Since what?" Shane looked around nervously, as if someone might be listening. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me." Shane was quiet for a long moment, then, "There's people up in those mountains, not hikers or campers. They live up there, in the old mine shafts. They don't like outsiders." "What kind of people?" "The kind that have been there since before the Apache, before the Spanish, before anyone. My grandfather used to tell stories, but I never believed them until I saw the lights myself." Travis wanted to dismiss it as the ramblings of a paranoid hermit, but something about Shane's fear seemed genuine. "These people," Travis said, "what do they do to outsiders? They watch them, study them, and if the outsiders see something they shouldn't—" Shane made a cutting motion across his throat. Over the following weeks, Travis dug deeper into the history of disappearances in the Superstition Mountains. The pattern went back decades, possibly centuries. Spanish conquistadors wrote about entire expeditions vanishing. Apache warriors spoke of forbidden areas where even they wouldn't venture. In the 1960s, a group of geology students from ASU disappeared. Only one was found, catatonic, unable to speak about what happened. Travis requested the file on the geology students. The survivor, now in his 70s, lived in a nursing home in Tucson. Travis drove down to interview him. Marcus sat in a wheelchair by the window, staring at the mountains in the distance. When Travis introduced himself and explained why he was there, Marcus's hands began to shake. "You found more bodies," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "A family of 4, they died, strangely." Marcus nodded slowly. Sitting in a row, eyes open, like they saw something that stopped their hearts? Travis felt a chill despite the warm room. "How did you know?" "Because that's how we found Professor Hendricks, and Janet, and Tom." Tears rolled down the old man's cheeks. "We were mapping the old Peralta mine when we found the chamber. Ancient, older than any mine. There were symbols on the walls, pictures that seemed to move in the torchlight. And then, they came." "Who came?" Marcus shook his head. "Not who. What?" "They looked human from a distance, but up close, their eyes were wrong. Too large, too dark, like looking into empty space. They didn't speak, just watched us. And when Professor Hendricks tried to photograph the symbols..." Marcus shuddered. The scream he made when he looked at them through the camera lens. Then he ran. We all ran, but only I made it out. "Where is this chamber?" Marcus grabbed Travis's arm with surprising strength. "Don't look for it. Don't go back there. Some things are meant to stay hidden." But Travis couldn't let it go. 4 people were dead, and there would be more if he didn't find answers. He spent his off hours studying topographical maps, comparing them with disappearance sites. A pattern emerged. All the incidents clustered around a specific area, a region of the mountains riddled with old mine shafts and natural caves. 2 weeks after the Brennan deaths, Travis decided to go back, alone, at night, following the coordinates he'd triangulated. He told no one, leaving only a sealed letter for his wife in case he didn't return. The hike in darkness was treacherous. More than once, Travis nearly turned back. But the memory of those 4 bodies, arranged like a macabre display, drove him forward. Around midnight, he found what he was looking for. A mine entrance partially concealed by a rockfall, exactly where his calculations suggested it would be. The tunnel beyond was not a typical mine shaft. The walls were too smooth, the angles too precise. This had been carved with purpose, not for ore, but for something else. Travis's flashlight beam penetrated only a few yards into the darkness. He was about to enter when he heard it. Footsteps behind him. He spun around, hand on his weapon, to find Blake Carson standing there. "What are you doing here?" Travis demanded. "Following you," Carson admitted. "I knew you'd come back. You're not the type to let this go. Go back to your car. This is dangerous." "That's why you need backup." Carson pulled out his own flashlight. "We go in together, or not at all." Travis wanted to argue, but he recognized the determination in the younger deputy's eyes. "Fine, but we do this my way. Stay close, stay quiet." They entered the tunnel together. The temperature dropped immediately, and their breath formed clouds in the beam of their flashlights. The tunnel descended at a steady angle, turning and branching in ways that defied the logic of mine construction. After what felt like an hour, but was probably 20 minutes, they emerged into a large chamber. Travis's light swept across the walls. revealing the symbols Marcus had described. They weren't quite drawings, weren't quite writing, but something in between that seemed to shift and change when looked at directly. "God Almighty," Carson whispered. "What is this place?" Before Travis could answer, they heard it, a sound like breathing, but wrong, too deep, too rhythmic, like the mountain itself was inhaling and exhaling. Then, at the edge of their light beams, movement. Figures emerged from the shadows. At first glance, they appeared human. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head where it should be. But, as they drew closer, the wrongness became apparent. Their movements were too fluid, like they had no bones. Their skin was pale to the point of translucence. And their eyes? Marcus had been right. They were vast pools of darkness that seemed to pull at Travis's vision. "Don't look directly at them," Travis said, remembering the Brennan family's fate. But Carson was already staring, transfixed. His breathing became rapid, panicked. What are they?" The figures stopped just outside the circle of light. There were 6 of them, standing perfectly still, watching, waiting. Travis grabbed Carson's arm. "We're leaving, now, back away slowly." They began to retreat, but the figures moved with them, maintaining the same distance. It was like a horrifying dance, predator and prey locked in slow motion. They were halfway back to the tunnel entrance when Carson stumbled, his flashlight swinging wildly. For a split second, the beam illuminated something else in the chamber. A massive shape, barely visible in the darkness, that Travis's mind couldn't quite process. It was organic, yet geometric, ancient, yet somehow alive. And it was watching them with intelligence that was definitely not human. Carson made a sound, a whimper that built to a scream. He clutched his chest, dropping to his knees. "No!" Travis grabbed him, trying to drag him toward the tunnel. "Don't look at it. Close your eyes." But it was too late. Carson's eyes were wide, pupils dilated to the point they looked entirely black. His mouth opened and closed, like he was trying to speak, but no words came. Just that terrible wheezing. The figures began to close in. Travis made a decision. He pulled out his service weapon and fired 3 shots into the air. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, and for a moment everything stopped. The figures retreated slightly, and Travis used the opportunity to hoist Carson over his shoulder and run. He ran through the tunnels in near darkness, Carson's weight making every step agony. Behind them, he could hear pursuit. Not footsteps exactly, but a sliding, scraping sound that grew closer with each passing second. They burst from the mine entrance into the desert night. Travis didn't stop. He half ran, half stumbled down the mountain trail, Carson still unconscious over his shoulder. It was only when they reached the parking area that he dared to look back. The mountains were dark and silent. Nothing had followed them out. Travis loaded Carson into his vehicle and drove directly to the nearest hospital. On the way, Carson regained consciousness but remained incoherent, mumbling about eyes in the darkness and shapes that couldn't exist. At the hospital, doctors found no physical cause for Carson's condition. Like the Brennan family, he appeared to have suffered some kind of massive psychological trauma that had affected him physically. He was sedated and transferred to a psychiatric facility for observation. Travis filed his report, leaving out most of what they'd encountered. He wrote that they'd investigated an old mine shaft, that Carson had suffered some kind of panic attack, possibly claustrophobia induced. Sheriff Barnes accepted the report without question, more concerned about the department's liability than the truth. But Travis knew the truth would eat at him. He'd seen something in that mountain, something that shouldn't exist. And worse, he knew it was still there, waiting. 3 days later, Blake Carson died in the psychiatric facility. The official cause was listed as sudden cardiac arrest, but the nurse on duty swore she'd seen someone in Carson's room just before he died. A tall, pale figure that disappeared when she turned on the lights. Travis attended the funeral, standing in the back as Carson's family grieved. After the service, Sheriff Barnes pulled him aside. "I'm closing the Brennan case," Barnes said. "Official cause of death. Exposure and dehydration leading to heart failure. That's not what killed them." "Maybe not, but it's what's going in the report. And Travis, I don't want you going back to those mountains. That's an order." Travis nodded, but they both knew he was lying. How could he stay away when he knew what was up there? How could he let other families venture into those mountains, unaware of what waited in the darkness? Over the next month, Travis researched obsessively. He found references in old Spanish documents to los que miran, those who watch. Apache legends spoke of the shadow people who lived in the sacred mountains. Even the indigenous peoples who came before had left pictographs warning of something in those peaks. He also found a pattern in modern disappearances. They came in cycles, roughly every 10 to 12 years. A cluster of vanishings, then nothing for a decade. The Brennan family marked the beginning of a new cycle. Travis tried to warn people. He suggested closing certain trails, posting warnings about dangerous mine shafts. But without official backing, his concerns were dismissed. Tourism was too important to the local economy. Then the calls started coming in. Hikers reporting strange lights on the ridges at night. Campers hearing impossible sounds. Voices that weren't quite human. Footsteps that didn't match any animal. And then, inevitably, the disappearances began. A college student named Tiffany Morrison, gone from a popular day hiking trail. Her camera was found, the last photo showing something pale and blurred in the background. An experienced outdoorsman named Mitchell Price, whose camp was discovered with everything intact except for him. His journal's final entry: "They're here. God help me, they're here." A young couple, Crystal Davis and Shane Williams, whose car was found at a trailhead with the doors open and the engine still running. Each time, Travis responded to the scene. Each time, he found subtle signs that others missed. The too-perfect arrangement of abandoned gear, the complete absence of struggle, the feeling of being watched even in broad daylight. He tried to establish a pattern, to predict where they would strike next. But the entities in the mountains seemed to choose their victims randomly, or by criteria Travis couldn't understand. The only consistency was that the victims were always alone or in small groups, always in remote areas, and always during the new moon when the desert night was at its darkest. 6 weeks after the Brennan incident, Travis made a decision. He couldn't stop what was happening, but maybe he could understand it. He prepared carefully. Weapons, supplies, cameras, and most importantly, a detailed map of where he was going and when he expected to return. He gave the sealed envelope to his wife with instructions to open it if he wasn't back in 48 hours. He returned to the mine shaft on a moonless night, but this time he wasn't alone. Shane Briggs, the hermit who'd been in the parking lot that night, had agreed to guide him. Shane knew more than he'd initially admitted. His grandfather had been part of a group that had encountered the entities in the 1940s. Most had died or gone insane, but a few had survived with knowledge of how to coexist with what lived in the mountains. "Rules," Shane said as they approached the mine. "Don't look directly at them. Don't photograph them. Don't take anything from the sacred places. And never, ever go deeper than the first chamber." What's deeper? The source, the thing they guard. My grandfather saw it once for just a second. He never spoke of what it was, only that it was older than the earth and waiting for something. They entered the mine together. This time, Travis was prepared for the wrongness of the tunnels, the impossible geometry. When they reached the chamber, the entities were already there, as if they'd been expecting them. Shane spoke to them in a language Travis didn't recognize. Not Apache or Spanish, something older. The entities remained still, watching. Then Shane placed something on the ground, a bundle of items Travis couldn't identify in the darkness. An offering. One of the entities moved forward, its motion liquid and unsettling. It reached for the bundle with appendages that weren't quite hands. For a moment, it turned its vast dark eyes on Travis, and he felt his heart skip. But then it retreated with the offering, and all the entities faded back into the shadows. "We can stay for 13 minutes, Shane whispered. "No more." Travis used the time to study the chamber, memorizing every detail. The symbols on the walls weren't static. They moved slowly, cycling through patterns that hurt to perceive directly. The air itself felt different, charged with an energy that made his skin crawl. And always, the sense of being watched by something vast and incomprehensible. When the 13 minutes were up, they left quickly. Outside, Travis was surprised to find he was shaking. "What did you give them?" he asked Shane. "Things they need, things they can't get themselves. It's an old arrangement. We provide, they tolerate our presence, sometimes. And when they don't tolerate it?" Shane looked back at the dark mine entrance. "Then, people like the Brennans die. We have to warn people, close the mountains. You think no one's tried. In the 60s, a group of government men came here, scientists, military, people with authority. 12 went into the deep chambers. None came out. The official story was a mine collapse, but there was no collapse. They just weren't anymore." Travis felt sick. "So we just let people die? We minimize it. Guide people away from the dangerous areas when we can. Make offerings to keep them satisfied. It's not perfect, but it's better than the alternative." "Which is?" Shane's face was grim. "They come down from the mountains." The implications of that statement haunted Travis for weeks. He threw himself into research, discovering accounts from around the world of similar entities, things that lived in the spaces between spaces, ancient beyond measure, indifferent to human life except when disturbed. He found a report from a Russian mining operation in Siberia that had broken through into a natural chamber and lost 36 workers in a single night. A cave system in Romania where entire villages had been found dead, arranged in careful patterns. An island in the Philippines where the U.S. military had tested weapons in the 1950s, only to abandon the tests after encountering something that violated the laws of physics and perception. The pattern was global, and it was old. Travis started a careful campaign of misdirection. He couldn't close the mountains, but he could make certain areas less appealing. He spread rumors of drug cartel activity in the most dangerous zones. He had trail markers mysteriously disappear. He even resorted to placing animal carcasses near popular camping spots to suggest predator activity. It worked, to a degree. The disappearances slowed but didn't stop, and Travis knew it was only a matter of time before someone else stumbled onto the truth. That someone turned out to be a journalist named Brooke, who'd noticed the pattern of disappearances and came to investigate. She was smart, persistent, and worst of all, she had resources. She'd already filed Freedom of Information requests, interviewed dozens of witnesses, and was planning to publish an exposé. Travis tried to discourage her, but she mistook his warnings for a cover-up, which technically they were. She became more determined, even hiring local guides to take her into the restricted areas. The night she disappeared, Travis was off duty, but he heard the call come in. Her abandoned car at the Peralta trailhead, her camp discovered empty the next morning. But unlike the others, Brooke had been live streaming her hike to her followers. The stream cut off abruptly, but not before capturing something. A tall, pale figure at the edge of the darkness, watching. The video went viral before anyone could stop it. Within days, conspiracy theorists, cryptid hunters, and thrill-seekers descended on the Superstition Mountains. It was a disaster waiting to happen. Travis worked 18-hour days trying to manage the chaos. They closed the official trails, but people found other ways in. They posted guards, but the mountains were too vast to patrol effectively. And then, as Shane had warned, they came down. It started with livestock. Cattle found dead on ranches bordering the wilderness. Arranged in circles, their hearts stopped. Then pets began disappearing from yards in Apache Junction and Gold Canyon. Finally, the first human casualty, an elderly man in Queen Creek who'd been sitting on his porch at dusk. His wife found him an hour later, eyes wide open, dead of apparent cardiac arrest. But the look on his face suggested he'd seen something terrible in his final moments. Travis knew what had to be done. He gathered Shane and 3 others who knew the truth. An Apache elder named Joseph, a park ranger named Maria, who'd lost her partner to the entities years ago, and surprisingly, Sheriff Barnes, who'd known more than he'd let on. They went into the mountains together on the new moon, carrying offerings not just from themselves but from the community. Items of value, food, water, even blood drawn from volunteers who didn't know its purpose. They went deeper than Travis had gone before, following Shane and Joseph, who knew the old paths. In the deepest chamber they dared enter, they performed a ritual that Joseph's grandfather had taught him, one that supposedly dated back to the first contact between humans and the entities. It was part negotiation, part supplication, part threat. A reminder that while humans were fragile, they were also numerous and capable of making the mountains uninhabitable for everyone if pushed too far. Travis never saw what answered their call. Joseph warned them not to look, and Travis kept his eyes firmly on the ground. But he heard it. A sound like the mountain breathing, like space itself tearing. He felt its presence, vast and ancient and utterly alien, and somehow, impossibly, he heard it speak. Not in words, but in meaning that appeared directly in his mind. The agreement was re-established. The entities would return to the deep places. The deaths would stop. But there were conditions. The mountains must be respected. Certain areas must remain untouched. And occasionally, when the stars were right and the desert sang its oldest song, offerings must be made. They agreed. What choice did they have? The group emerged from the mountains at dawn, exhausted and changed. Travis had aged years in a single night. Shane never spoke again, communicating only in gestures and written notes. Joseph died 3 days later, peacefully in his sleep, as if his purpose had been fulfilled. Sheriff Barnes officially closed large sections of the Superstition Mountains for environmental restoration. The media attention gradually died down as no new disappearances occurred. The viral video was explained away as a hoax, the figure nothing more than a hiker in distress. But Travis knew the truth. He became the keeper of the agreement, making sure the offerings were made, the boundaries respected. He guided people away from the dangerous areas with carefully placed warnings and obstacles. He monitored the cycles, watching for signs that the entities were stirring. 5 years passed. Travis had nightmares most nights, dreams of vast dark eyes and impossible geometries. His marriage suffered. His health declined. But he continued his vigil, because he knew what would happen if he didn't. Then, last month, a development company announced plans to build a luxury resort in the Superstition foothills, the exact area that overlapped with the forbidden zones. Travis tried to stop it through official channels, but the company had connections, lawyers, and most importantly, money. The night the survey team went missing, Travis wasn't surprised. 4 men vanished without a trace, their equipment found arranged in a perfect circle. The company blamed it on cartel activity and sent a security team. They disappeared too. Travis knew what was coming. The entities had been patient for 5 years, but human greed was about to break the agreement. He made one last trip into the mountains, alone this time, carrying his service weapon and a letter for his wife. He found them waiting in the first chamber, more numerous than ever before. They didn't move as he approached, didn't react as he spoke. He explained about the development, the impossibility of stopping it through human means. He offered himself in exchange for more time, a chance to find another solution. They refused, not in words, but in a feeling of absolute finality that left no room for negotiation. Travis left the mountains knowing that the cycle was about to begin again, worse than before. The development would proceed, people would die, and eventually, when the deaths became too numerous to ignore or explain away, the mountains would be closed permanently. But by then, the entities might have spread beyond their ancient boundaries, into the cities and towns of the valley below. He wrote his report, sealed it, and placed it in a safety deposit box with instructions for it to be opened only if he disappeared. Then he did what he'd always done. He went back to work, responding to calls, maintaining the illusion of normalcy, and waiting for the darkness to descend. The last entry in Travis Hawthorne's personal journal, found in his abandoned patrol car at the Peralta trailhead, read, "They're not evil, that's what people don't understand. They're not good either. They simply are, like gravity or radiation. We built our civilization in their shadow, never knowing they were there until we pushed too far. Now, there's no going back. The mountains belong to them, they always have. We were just borrowing the space between their dreams. But the dream is ending, and when they fully wake, God help us all." Travis Hawthorne's body was never found. The development was canceled after 17 people disappeared in 3 weeks. The Superstition Mountains are now closed indefinitely for geological instability. But on certain nights, when the desert wind blows cold and the stars seem too bright, locals report seeing lights on the forbidden peaks. Not flashlights or campfires, but something older, watching and waiting. The call came in at 3:47 a.m., jarring Sheriff's Deputy Mitchell Reeves from the first decent sleep he'd had in weeks. October in Coconino County meant the tourist season was winding down, but it also meant more missing hikers, people underestimating the desert, chasing perfect Instagram shots, ignoring posted warnings. "Mitchell, we need you at the station," dispatch said. "We've got another one, maybe 2. "Missing hikers?" "Yeah, but this one's different. You need to see what we found." Mitchell dressed in the dark, careful not to wake his daughter Amber. Ever since his wife had left, it had just been the 2 of them, and his irregular hours weren't making single parenthood any easier. He left a note on the kitchen counter and drove through the empty streets of Sedona toward the sheriff's station. The red rocks were barely visible in the pre-dawn darkness, but Mitchell knew they were there. Massive sandstone formations that drew millions of visitors each year. Cathedral Rock, Bell Rock, Devil's Bridge. Beautiful by day, but at night they became something else. Shadows played tricks. Sounds echoed strangely, and people disappeared. Sheriff Wayne Cooper was waiting in his office, along with 2 other deputies Mitchell recognized, Shane Torres and Crystal Mathis. On Cooper's desk was an evidence bag containing what looked like a smartphone. "Brooke Caldwell, 28, from California," Cooper began without preamble. "Went hiking yesterday morning on the Devil's Bridge Trail with her boyfriend, Kyle Hoffman, 31. Neither came back. Her roommate called it in around midnight. "Devil's Bridge," Mitchell muttered. "How many times do we have to tell people not to hike alone out there?" "They weren't alone," Crystal said. "That's the weird part. Look at this." She pulled up a video on the phone. It showed a young woman, presumably Brooke, standing on the famous natural arch known as Devil's Bridge. The red rocks stretched out behind her, beautiful in the morning light. She was smiling, talking to whoever was holding the camera, presumably Kyle. "Isn't this amazing?" Brooke was saying. "I can't believe we have it all to ourselves." The camera panned across the landscape, then back to Brooke. She was still smiling, but something in her expression had changed. She was looking at something off camera. "Kyle?" she said. "Kyle, who is that?" The camera swung around wildly, showing nothing but red rock and blue sky. Then it dropped, showing feet in dirt, and the video cut off. "That's it?" Mitchell asked. "Check the timestamp," Crystal said. 10:47 a.m. yesterday, but look at this. She swiped to the next video. It was darker, grainier, like it had been filmed in low light. Mitchell could make out what looked like the interior of a cave or overhang. Someone was breathing heavily, panicked, scared. "They're still following us," a male voice whispered. Kyle. "God help us, Brooke, they're still following us." "Shut up," Brooke's voice, barely audible. "They'll hear you." The camera moved slightly, showing a glimpse of Brooke's face. She was crying. Dirt and what looked like blood streaked across her cheek. "We have to go deeper," Kyle whispered. "Maybe there's another way out." "No," Brooke said. "No, we can't. You saw what's down there." "It's better than—" A sound interrupted him. Footsteps, but wrong somehow. Too many, too synchronized, like a dozen people walking in perfect unison. The camera shook as Kyle apparently started running. The last few seconds were a blur of darkness and motion, then nothing. "Timestamp on that one is 8:23 p.m., Crystal said. Almost 10 hours after the first video. Mitchell studied the phone. "Where did we find this?" "Trail junction about 2 miles from Devil's Bridge," Shane said. "Just sitting on a rock in the middle of the trail, like someone placed it there for us to find. Search and rescue. Went out at first light," Cooper said. "Found their car at the trailhead, backpacks at the bridge, but no sign of them. We've had teams out all day, nothing." Mitchell knew the area well. He'd hiked every trail in Sedona over his 15 years with the department. The Devil's Bridge area was popular but treacherous. Steep drops, unstable rocks, and a maze of side canyons that could disorient even experienced hikers. "I'll take a team out," Mitchell said. "Focus on the caves and overhangs. If they were hiding from someone—" "From who?" Cooper interrupted. "This is Sedona, not Juarez. We don't have people stalking tourists on hiking trails." Mitchell wanted to argue, but Cooper was right. Sedona was a peaceful town, its biggest crimes usually involving drunk tourists or petty theft. But something about those videos bothered him. The synchronized footsteps, the terror in Brooke and Kyle's voices. They weren't running from wildlife. "Give me Torres and 2 volunteers from Search and Rescue," Mitchell said. "We'll do a grid search of the canyon system east of Devil's Bridge." Cooper nodded. "You have until dark. If you don't find anything, we're calling in state resources." An hour later, Mitchell was on the trail with Shane and 2 search and rescue volunteers, Travis Howell, a local rock climbing guide, and Sierra Nash, an experienced tracker. The morning sun painted the red rocks in brilliant shades of orange and gold, but Mitchell barely noticed. He was focused on the ground, looking for signs. They reached Devil's Bridge by 7 a.m. The natural sandstone arch stretched 50 feet across a steep canyon, with drops of over 100 feet on either side. Tourist season meant there should have been dozens of people here already, but Cooper had closed the trail. They had the place to themselves. "Blood," Sierra called out, crouched near the edge of the bridge. "Not much, just a few drops, but fresh. Maybe day old." Mitchell photographed the blood, then looked around. The bridge was exposed, nowhere to hide. If Brooke and Kyle had been running from someone, they would have had to go either back down the trail or into the rugged terrain beyond. "If I were scared and running," Travis said, "I'd head for those slot canyons to the east. Lots of places to hide." They spent the next 3 hours searching the canyons. The terrain was brutal. Loose rocks, dense vegetation, and narrow passages that required careful navigation. They found more blood on a thorny bush, some fabric that might have come from a shirt, but no sign of Brooke or Kyle. Around noon, Shane called out from a narrow side canyon. "Got something!" Mitchell squeezed through the gap between two massive boulders and found Shane standing at the entrance to a cave. It wasn't on any map Mitchell knew of, just a dark opening in the rock face, partially hidden by an overhang. "Footprints," Shane said, pointing to the sandy ground. "2 sets going in, nothing coming out." Mitchell pulled out his flashlight and weapon. "Shane, you're with me. Travis, Sierra, stay here and watch our backs." The cave was larger than it appeared from outside. The entrance opened into a chamber about 20 feet across, with a ceiling high enough to stand upright. Mitchell's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing smooth walls carved by centuries of water erosion. "Look at this," Shane said, his light focused on the ground. There were footprints everywhere, dozens of them, maybe more, but they all looked identical. Same size, same tread pattern, arranged in perfect parallel lines like soldiers marching in formation. "This isn't possible," Mitchell muttered. They pushed deeper into the cave. The main chamber narrowed into a tunnel that sloped downward. The air grew colder, and Mitchell noticed something else. A smell. Metallic, organic, wrong. The tunnel opened into another chamber, and Mitchell's light swept across something that made him stop cold. Bodies. But not Brooke and Kyle. 3 corpses, arranged in a perfect line against the far wall. They were dressed in hiking gear, but the clothing was dated. Styles from the 90s, maybe early 2000s. The bodies were mummified by the dry desert air. Skin pulled tight across bones. Eyes gone, mouths open in what might have been screams. "Jesus," Shane whispered. "How long have they been here?" Mitchell approached carefully. Each body had a laminated card placed on its chest. He picked one up, angling it toward his light. Jennifer Walsh. Missing since October 15th, 1998. He checked the others. David Park. October 15th, 2003. Marcus Rivera. October 15th, 2008. All October 15th, Shane said. 5 years apart. And today is October 15th, 2023. They looked at each other, the implication clear. Every 5 years on the same date, someone disappeared and ended up here. Which meant Brooke and Kyle were meant to be the next in line. A sound from deeper in the cave made them both freeze. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving in perfect synchronization. "We need to go," Mitchell said. "Now." They backed toward the tunnel, but the footsteps were getting closer. Mitchell could see lights now. Flashlights or headlamps, at least 6 of them, moving through the darkness with unnatural precision. "Stop," a voice called out. Male, flat, emotionless. "You're trespassing." Mitchell raised his weapon. "Sheriff's Department, identify yourself." The lights stopped moving. Then, in perfect unison, 6 figures stepped into view. They looked human at first glance. 2 men, 4 women, all dressed in civilian clothes. But something was profoundly wrong. They moved in perfect synchronization, every gesture, every breath identical. Their faces were blank, expressionless, and their eyes reflected Mitchell's flashlight like an animal's, glowing silver in the darkness. "You need to leave," they said. All 6 of them speaking in perfect unison with the same flat tone. "This is a sacred place. We're looking for 2 missing hikers," Mitchell said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Brooke, Caldwell, and Kyle Hoffman. Have you seen them?" The 6 figures tilted their heads, all at exactly the same angle, at exactly the same moment. "They have been chosen," the voices said, "as were the others, as you will be if you don't leave. Chosen for what? To feed the mountain, to maintain the balance. Every 5 years the mountain must feed." Mitchell felt Shane tense beside him. This was insane. 6 people, speaking and moving as one, talking about feeding a mountain. But the bodies behind them were real. The threat was real. "We're taking those bodies with us," Mitchell said. "They have families who deserve closure. The mountain keeps what the mountain takes." The figures took a step forward, still in perfect unison. Mitchell noticed something else. They weren't breathing. Their chests didn't rise and fall. They were perfectly, unnaturally still, except when they moved. "Shane," Mitchell whispered. "When I say run." But Shane was already backing away, his hand on his weapon. The figures watched them retreat, their silver eyes unblinking. They made it to the tunnel before the figures moved again. Not walking, something else. They seemed to flicker, appearing closer without taking steps, like a film skipping frames. "Run!" Mitchell and Shane sprinted through the tunnel, their flashlights swinging wildly. Behind them, those synchronized footsteps echoed off the walls, getting closer despite their head start. They burst from the cave into blinding daylight. Travis and Sierra were waiting, weapons drawn. "What the hell?" Travis started. "Move! Everyone move!" They ran, stumbling over rocks, crashing through brush. Mitchell looked back once and saw the 6 figures standing at the cave entrance, watching them flee. They didn't pursue into the sunlight. Back at the sheriff's station, Mitchell's report was met with skepticism. Cooper listened to the story, looked at the photos Mitchell had managed to take of the bodies, and shook his head. "You're telling me there's a cult in the mountains that sacrifices hikers every 5 years. "I'm telling you what we saw," Mitchell said. "Those bodies are real. Those people, or whatever they are real. And they just let you go? They didn't follow us into the sunlight. Maybe they can't." Cooper was quiet for a long moment. Then, "We're going back in force, full SWAT. State police backup. We're getting those bodies and finding our missing hikers." The operation was planned for dawn the next day. 20 officers, full tactical gear, helicopter support. Mitchell tried to warn them about what they'd seen, but most dismissed it as mountain hermits or drug addicts. Only Shane believed him, because Shane had seen it too. They entered the cave at 0600 hours. The first chamber was empty. The tunnel was clear. But when they reached the second chamber, nothing. No bodies, no evidence they'd ever been there. The ground had been swept clean. No footprints, no blood, nothing. It was as if Mitchell and Shane had imagined the whole thing. "You sure this is the right cave?" Cooper asked. Mitchell knew it was. The shape of the walls, the slope of the tunnel. This was definitely the place. But everything was gone. They searched for 6 hours, expanding the grid, checking every cave and overhang in a 3-mile radius. They found nothing. No sign of Brooke and Kyle. No evidence of the 6 figures Mitchell and Shane had encountered. The search was called off at sunset. Brooke and Kyle were officially listed as missing, presumed dead. The case went cold, but Mitchell couldn't let it go. He researched the names he'd seen on those cards: Jennifer Walsh, David Park, Marcus Rivera, all real people who'd disappeared while hiking in Sedona, all on October 15th of their respective years, all from the Devil's Bridge area. He dug deeper, finding more disappearances with the same pattern going back decades. October 15th, 1993. October 15th, 1988. Always the same date, always the same area, always hikers who vanished without a trace. He also found something else. Local Native American legends spoke of the Hollow Ones, people who'd sold their souls to the mountain spirits in exchange for immortality. They lived in the deep places, emerging only to collect payment for their bargain. Every 5 years they had to provide the mountain with new souls, or they would lose their immortality and crumble to dust. Mitchell shared his findings with Shane, who'd been doing his own research. "Look at this," Shane said, showing Mitchell an old newspaper article from 1968. Group of 6 hikers went missing near Devil's Bridge. They were found 3 days later, walking out of the desert in perfect formation. They claimed no memory of what happened, but all their friends and family said they were different afterward. Cold, emotionless. They all left town within a month and were never seen again. You think those were our 6? The timing works. If they made their deal in 1968, they would have started collecting in 1973, every 5 years since then. Mitchell did the math, which means they've taken at least 10 people that we know of, probably more. And we can't do anything about it. No evidence, no bodies, no crime scene. They were right. Without physical evidence, there was no case. But Mitchell couldn't stop thinking about Brooke and Kyle. Were they dead? Or were they something worse? New recruits for the Hollow Ones, transformed into soulless collectors for the mountain. 2 weeks later, Mitchell was patrolling the trails near Devil's Bridge, officially checking for illegal camping, unofficially looking for any sign of the missing hikers. The sun was setting, painting the rocks blood red, when he saw her, Brooke Caldwell, standing on a ridge about 100 yards away. Mitchell called out, but she didn't respond. He climbed toward her, scrambling over loose rocks. When he reached the ridge, she was gone. But there was something on the ground where she'd been standing. A smartphone. It was Brooke's, or at least identical to hers. Mitchell turned it on and found a single video file dated that day. He played it. The video showed Brooke and Kyle, but they were different. Their faces were blank, expressionless. Their eyes reflected the light like mirrors. They stood side by side, perfectly still, and when they spoke, it was in unison. "Stop looking for us," they said. "We have been chosen. We are part of the mountain now. In 5 years, we will choose others. This is the way." The video ended. Mitchell looked around, but he was alone on the ridge. The sun had set, and darkness was falling fast. He hurried back to his vehicle, the phone clutched in his hand. Back at the station, the phone was dead. No videos, no data, completely wiped. The tech team couldn't recover anything. It was as if the phone had never been used. Hooper closed the case the next day, citing lack of evidence and resources. Mitchell was ordered to stop his unofficial investigation, but he couldn't stop. Every October 15th, he patrols the trails near Devil's Bridge, warning hikers, watching for the Hollow Ones. It's been a year now. October 15th is coming again, but it's not a collection year. The mountain won't feed for another 4 years, but Mitchell knows they're out there. Brooke, Kyle, and the others, waiting in the darkness, bound to their terrible bargain. Sometimes hikers report strange experiences near Devil's Bridge. Groups of people moving in perfect synchronization, voices speaking in unison, figures with silver eyes watching from the shadows. Mitchell documents every report, building a file that no one else will look at. He knows he can't stop them. The hollow ones have been collecting for over 50 years. But maybe he can warn people. Maybe he can save a few lives. Or maybe, in 4 years, he'll be the one who disappears. The mountain is patient. The mountain is hungry. And the hollow ones always collect their due. The last entry in Mitchell's personal journal, written just last week, I dream about them now. Standing in perfect formation, their silver eyes watching me. Sometimes Brooke and Kyle are with them. Sometimes it's other faces. Future victims, maybe, or past ones I couldn't save. They all speak with the same voice. The mountain must feed. I've tried to find the cave again, but it's gone. Not sealed, gone. As if it never existed. Shane thinks they can move the entrances, shift the rock itself. Impossible, but so is everything else about this. 4 more years until the next collection. I'll be ready. I have to be. Because if I'm not, 2 more names will be added to the list of the disappeared. 2 more souls fed to whatever lives in the heart of the red rocks. I wonder sometimes if the Native Americans were right. Maybe some places belong to older things. Things that were here before us and will be here long after we're gone. Maybe we're the trespassers, and the hollow ones are just enforcing boundaries we can't understand. But I know one thing for certain. Devil's Bridge isn't just a tourist attraction. It's a gateway. And every 5 years, that gateway demands payment. Deputy Carson Wells had been with the Pima County Sheriff's Office for only 6 months when he got the call that would haunt him for the rest of his life. It was a Tuesday morning in November, unseasonably cold for southern Arizona, with rain clouds gathering over the Santa Rita Mountains. "Carson, you're with me," Sheriff Patricia Hawkins said, appearing at his desk. "We've got a situation in Helvetia." Carson looked up from his paperwork. Helvetia, the ghost town? That's the one. Some urban explorers called in something unusual. Helvetia had been a copper mining town in the early 1900s, abandoned for decades after the mines played out. Now it was just ruins in the desert, crumbling adobe walls, rusted mining equipment, and networks of dangerous tunnels that attracted thrill seekers despite numerous warning signs. They drove south from Tucson in silence, the sheriff unusually tense. Carson had learned not to push for information. Hawkins would share when she was ready. The rain started as they turned onto the dirt road leading to Helvetia, turning the desert dust into thick mud. The first thing Carson noticed was the smell. Even through the rain, there was something wrong in the air, metallic, chemical, with an underlying sweetness that made his stomach turn. 3 vehicles were parked at the entrance to the town, 2 Pima County patrol cars, and a beat-up Honda Civic that presumably belonged to the urban explorers. Deputies Shane Martinez and Crystal were standing with 2 young men who looked pale and shaken. "Sheriff," Martinez nodded. "These are the ones who called it in. Blake Morrison and Travis, both from U of A. Blake, tall and lanky with a week's worth of stubble, was holding a camera with shaking hands. Travis, shorter and wearing a Wildcats hoodie, kept looking back toward the ruins as if expecting something to follow them. "Tell the sheriff what you told me," Martinez said. Blake swallowed hard. "We were just photographing the old buildings. Urban decay stuff for my photography project. We went into the old mine office because the door was open. The door was sealed last month," Hawkins interrupted. "County maintenance put a new padlock on it." "Well, it was open when we got here," Travis said. The padlock was cut. We figured other explorers had been through, so we went in. And Blake held up his camera. Maybe you should just look at the pictures. Hawkins took the camera, and Carson looked over her shoulder as she scrolled through the images. The first few were typical urban exploration shots: peeling paint, broken windows, rusted filing cabinets. Then the photos changed. The main room of the mine office had been transformed into something out of a nightmare. The walls were covered in symbols drawn in what looked like dried blood, geometric patterns that hurt to look at, mathematical equations that seemed wrong somehow, and repeated phrases in languages Carson didn't recognize. But it was the center of the room that made Carson's blood run cold. 5 chairs arranged in a pentagram, and in each chair. "Are those mannequins?" Carson asked, though he already knew the answer. "No," Blake said quietly. "They were people, but they didn't move. Not even when we got close. They just sat there, staring." Hawkins handed the camera back. "Show us." Blake and Travis exchanged glances. "We're not going back in there." "You don't have to. Just point us in the right direction." The mine office was a 2-story adobe building, one of the few structures in Helvetia that still had most of its walls and roof. The door was indeed open, the heavy padlock lying in the mud, clearly cut with bolt cutters. Hawkins drew her weapon. "Carson, Martinez, you're with me. Crystal, watch the witnesses." They entered slowly, flashlights cutting through the dim interior. The smell was stronger inside: blood, decay, and something else Carson couldn't identify. Chemical, almost like formaldehyde. The main room was exactly as the photos had shown. 5 people sitting in chairs arranged in a perfect pentagram. They were dressed in normal clothes: jeans, tie shirts, sneakers. Ages ranging from maybe 20 to 50. All sitting perfectly still, eyes open, staring at nothing. Carson approached the nearest figure, a woman in her 30s with blonde hair. Her eyes didn't track his movement. He checked for a pulse. Nothing. Her skin was cold, but not corpse cold, something in between. "They're dead," he said, "but quoi, fresh. No rigor mortis, no lividity." "How long?" Hawkins asked. "I'm not a medical examiner, but based on body temperature, maybe 6 to 8 hours. Martinez was examining the walls. "Sheriff, you need to see this." One section of the wall was covered in newspaper clippings, some recent, others decades old. They all had one thing in common: missing persons cases from southern Arizona. Dozens of them. In the center was a map of the region with red pins marking locations. Helvetia was at the center, with lines radiating out to other abandoned mining towns: Ruby, Harshaw, Duquesne, Sunnyside. Each had multiple pins clustered around it. "It's a network," Hawkins said. "Someone's been using these ghost towns for something." Carson was studying the symbols on the walls when he noticed writing in English among the foreign scripts. "The copper feeds the earth feeds the flesh feeds the void." "Cult?" Martinez suggested. "Maybe," Hawkins said. "Call it in. We need the medical examiner, crime scene techs, the works, and nobody else comes in here until—" A sound from upstairs cut her off. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. All 3 deputies raised their weapons. "Sheriff's Department," Hawkins called. "Come down with your hands visible." The footsteps stopped. Then a voice, high and sing-song like a child's. "You shouldn't be here. It's not time yet." "This is Sheriff Hawkins. I need you to come downstairs immediately. The Copper Prince doesn't like visitors. He's very particular about timing." Carson and Martinez exchanged glances. Hawkins motioned for them to cover the stairs while she continued talking. "What's your name?" Are you hurt? We can help you. Laughter, but wrong somehow. Multiple voices laughing in harmony. We don't need help. We're perfect now. The Copper Prince made us perfect. Carson moved to the base of the stairs, weapon raised. The second floor was dark, but he could see movement in the shadows. Multiple figures, all moving in strange, jerky motions like marionettes. How many are up there? Hawkins whispered. Before Carson could answer, they came down the stairs. 7 people, moving in perfect synchronization but with unnatural, stuttering movements. Their faces were blank, eyes unfocused, mouths slightly open. Some were in various states of undress, their skin marked with the same symbols that covered the walls. "Stop right there," Hawkins commanded. They didn't stop. They moved toward the deputies with that same jerky gait, arms reaching out. Carson could see now that their fingernails had been replaced with copper wire, twisted into sharp points. "Stop, or we will fire." They kept coming. Hawkins fired a warning shot into the ceiling. The figures didn't even flinch. They just kept advancing with those blank expressions and reaching hands. "Out! Everyone out!" The deputies retreated, backing toward the door. The figures followed but stopped at the threshold, unable or unwilling to cross into the daylight. Outside, Hawkins immediately called for backup. "All available units to Helvetia. We have multiple suspects, possible homicides, potential public safety threat." While they waited, Carson watched the doorway. The figures had retreated into the shadows, but he could still see them moving inside. Occasionally, one would approach the threshold and stare out at them with those empty eyes. "What the hell are they?" Martinez asked. "Drugged," Hawkins said, though she didn't sound convinced. "Has to be. PCP, bath salts, something that explains the behavior." But Carson had seen people on drugs. This was different. The synchronized movement, the lack of response to gunfire, the copper wire fingernails, this was deliberate, planned. Backup arrived within an hour. 6 patrol cars, a SWAT van, and an ambulance. They surrounded the building, and SWAT prepared to enter. "Non-lethal force if possible," Hawkins instructed. "These people might be victims." SWAT entered in formation, but the building was empty. The 7 figures from upstairs were gone. The 5 bodies in the chairs remained, along with all the writing and symbols on the walls. A search revealed a hole in the floor of a back room, a tunnel leading down into the old mine shafts. "They went underground," the SWAT commander reported. "The tunnel system is extensive. We'd need a full search team, and even then..." Hawkins made the call to seal the building and establish a perimeter. The medical examiner arrived and began processing the bodies. Dr. Sarah Kim, a 20-year veteran, looked increasingly disturbed as she worked. "Sheriff," she called Hawkins over, "you need to see this." She had opened one of the victim's shirts, revealing the chest cavity. The skin was marked with precise surgical scars. "These people have been operated on," Dr. Kim said, "recently, and look at this." She pressed on the chest, and instead of the usual resistance, there was a strange, clicking sound. Using a scalpel, she made a small incision. Instead of blood, a dark, viscous fluid leaked out, and beneath the skin... "Is that copper?" Carson asked. "Copper wire," Dr. Kim confirmed. "Woven through the muscle tissue. It's all through the body. I can feel it under the skin. Someone has literally wired these people." "Are they dead?" Hawkins asked. Dr. Kim hesitated. "By any normal medical definition, yes. No heartbeat, no brain activity. But the cellular degradation is wrong. It's like they're preserved somehow. And this fluid..." She collected a sample. "I'll need to run tests, but it's not blood. It's something synthetic." They worked the scene until dark. collecting evidence, photographing everything. The symbols were documented, though no one could identify the language. The newspaper clippings revealed disappearances going back 40 years, all from the same cluster of ghost towns. As night fell, they heard it, singing from underground. Multiple voices in harmony, the words unclear, but the melody haunting. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing through the abandoned buildings. "We're pulling out," Hawkins decided. "Seal every entrance to the mine we can find. Nobody goes underground until we know what we're dealing with." They posted guards at the main entrance and established a command post at the edge of town. Carson volunteered for the first watch, paired with Crystal. Around midnight, they saw lights in the ruins. Not flashlights. A strange blue-green glow that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the underground singing. "Should we investigate?" Crystal asked. "Negative," came Hawkins' voice over the radio. "Observe and report only." The lights moved through the buildings, sometimes disappearing only to reappear elsewhere. Carson counted at least a dozen separate sources. Then, around 2 a.m., they converged on the mine office. Figures emerged from the building. Not the 7 from earlier, but new ones. They moved with the same jerky motions, their skin reflecting that blue-green light. They carried objects Carson couldn't identify at distance. They formed a procession, moving toward the old smelter at the edge of town. The singing grew louder, and Carson could finally make out some words, though they were in English mixed with something else. Copper blood, copper bone, bone, flesh of earth, earth of stone. The prince rises, the prince calls, copper kingdom, copper thralls. The procession disappeared into the smelter, and the singing stopped. The lights went out. The desert was silent except for the sound of light rain on the patrol car's roof. "Did you see their faces?" Crystal asked quietly. Carson had, through his binoculars. Some of the figures in the procession had been reported missing weeks ago. Others, according to the photos they'd collected, had disappeared years ago, but hadn't aged a day. Morning brought more disturbing discoveries. The 5 bodies from the chairs were gone, despite the building being under guard. The guards swore no one had entered or left, but the bodies had simply vanished, leaving only those strange surgical scars in the dust where they'd been. Dr. Kim's preliminary analysis of the fluid was even more troubling. "It's a synthetic compound I've never seen before. Organic polymers mixed with copper sulfate and other minerals. It's almost like artificial blood, but here's the really weird part. It's still active. Under the microscope, it moves, responds to stimuli. It's not alive exactly, but it's not dead either." The investigation expanded. State police were brought in, along with federal agencies. The mine entrances were sealed with concrete, but the singing continued underground. Motion sensors picked up movement in the tunnels, always heading deeper. Carson was assigned to research the history of Helvetia and the other ghost towns. What he found chilled him more than anything he'd seen in that office. In 1911, just before the mine started closing, there had been an incident. 17 miners had been trapped in a cave-in at the Copper Queen mine. They were underground for 3 weeks before rescue teams reached them. But when they did, only one miner was still alive. A man named Josiah Prince. Prince claimed the others had died in the cave-in, but the bodies showed signs of cannibalism and worse. Prince was institutionalized, raving about the copper god and the transformation. He escaped 6 months later and was never seen again. But there were stories. Sightings of Prince near abandoned mines throughout southern Arizona. Always accompanied by disappearances. Always leaving behind those strange symbols. Carson found a photograph from 1913 showing Prince after his rescue. The face was gaunt, traumatized, but the eyes, Carson had seen those eyes recently, on one of the figures in the procession. Josiah Prince was still alive over 100 years later. Carson brought his findings to Hawkins. She studied the evidence, then made a decision that surprised him. "We're going in. Full tactical team, hazmat gear, the works. We find these people and we stop whatever they're doing." The operation was planned for dawn. 20 officers would enter through the main shaft while another team watched the exits. They had maps of the mine from historical records, though everyone knew the tunnels could have been modified over the decades. Carson was part of the entry team. They descended into darkness, their lights revealing walls lined with that same copper wire, woven into complex patterns. The air was thick with that chemical smell, and their hazmat gear suddenly seemed inadequate. 100 feet down, they found the first chamber. It was carved from solid rock, walls covered in those symbols. In the center was a pool of that dark fluid, and floating in it. "Are those bodies?" someone asked. They were, dozens of them, suspended in the liquid, copper wire connecting them in a vast network. Some were clearly dead, mummified by the fluid. Others opened their eyes as the lights hit them. "Dear God," Hawkins whispered. They pressed deeper, finding more chambers. Processing rooms where bodies were prepared. Surgical equipment that looked both ancient and impossibly advanced. And everywhere, that copper wire, growing like veins through the rock itself. In the deepest chamber they could reach, they found him, Josiah Prince, though he barely looked human anymore. His skin was the color of oxidized copper, wire growing from his body into the walls themselves. He was connected to everything, the center of the network. "You're too early," he said, his voice carrying despite the distance. "The transformation isn't complete." "Josiah Prince," Hawkins called out. "You're under arrest for murder, kidnapping, and—" He laughed, and the sound echoed from every tunnel, every chamber. The bodies in the pools began to move, pulling themselves free from the fluid. "You don't understand," Prince said. "The copper spoke to me in the darkness, showed me the truth. Flesh is temporary, but the earth is eternal. We're becoming eternal." The modified people began emerging from side tunnels. Dozens of them, all with that jerky movement and copper wire fingers. The team formed a defensive circle, weapons raised. "The transformation will continue," Prince said. "Willing or not, you'll all join us. The Copper Prince demands it." "Open fire," Hawkins commanded. The gunfire was deafening in the enclosed space. The modified people jerked and twitched as bullets struck them, that dark fluid leaking from their wounds. But they didn't fall. They kept coming, reaching with those copper wire fingers. Fall back to the main shaft." The team retreated, firing controlled bursts to slow the advancing figures. Carson saw one officer go down, copper wires piercing through his hazmat suit. The man screamed, then went rigid as the wires spread under his skin. "Leave him," Hawkins shouted. "He's gone." They reached the main shaft, but the lift wasn't there. Someone had cut the cables from above. "Emergency ladder!" Martinez pointed to the rusted rungs bolted to the shaft wall. They started climbing, the modified people following with inhuman persistence. Carson looked down and saw dozens of them, moving up the walls like spiders, copper wires extending from their fingers to grip the rock. Halfway up, Travis, one of the urban explorers who'd made the initial call, was waiting at a side tunnel. But his eyes were now that familiar blank stare. "You can't leave," he said in a monotone voice. "The Copper Prince needs you." He lunged at Carson, who barely managed to dodge. Travis fell past him, down into the mass of climbing figures below. They absorbed him into their ranks without pause. Only 12 of the 20 officers made it to the surface. The entrance was immediately sealed with concrete and steel plating, but they could still hear the scratching from below. "We need to evacuate the area," Hawkins said, blood running from a gash on her forehead. "Create a perimeter at least 5 miles out." But even as they pulled back, reports came in. The modified people were emerging from other mine entrances some miles away. The tunnel system was more extensive than anyone had realized, connecting not just the mines around Helvetia, but reaching toward other ghost towns. The National Guard was called in. The official story was a chemical leak from old mining equipment. The real investigation went underground, literally and figuratively. A joint task force was created, bringing in experts from the CDC, FBI, and even some agencies Carson had never heard of. Dr. Kim's analysis grew more disturbing with each test. The copper wire wasn't just wire. It was somehow organic, growing like a fungus through the victims' bodies. The dark fluid was replacing their blood, keeping tissues preserved while fundamentally changing their biology. "They're not human anymore," she told Carson privately. "They're something else. And based on the growth patterns, this transformation, it's not random. Someone or something is directing it." Carson was assigned to track the disappearances, creating a timeline. The pattern was clear. Every few years, the number of missing persons would spike, always centered on the ghost towns. But recently, the pattern had accelerated. What used to happen every 5 years was now happening monthly. 3 weeks after the initial incident, Carson was working late at the command post when his radio crackled. "Movement at the Duquesne site," reported one of the guards stationed at another ghost town. Multiple figures emerging from the transmission cut to screams, then static. By the time reinforcements arrived, they found the guard post empty. Blood on the ground, but no bodies. The town of Duquesne, 20 miles from Helvetia, was now showing the same blue-green lights. The situation was spiraling out of control. The governor declared a state of emergency. The affected zone was expanded to encompass 6 ghost towns. Residents of nearby communities were evacuated, but the modified people were adapting. They started appearing in populated areas, no longer confined to the ruins. A family in Tubac reported their missing daughter returning home, but changed. Copper wires visible under her skin, speaking in that same monotone about the copper prints. Carson interviewed the family before they were relocated. The daughter, Kendra, age 16, sat perfectly still during the questioning. "Where have you been, Kendra?" Carson asked. "Below, learning, transforming. Who took you?" "No one took me, I was called. We're all called eventually. The copper sings to us." "Who is the Copper Prince?" For the first time, Kendra's expression changed, a smile that didn't reach her empty eyes. "He's not a who, he's a what, he's the future. Flesh fails, but copper endures. We're becoming something better. Where's Josiah Prince? Everywhere. He's in the wires now, in the earth, in us." She tilted her head. "He says you're resisting. That's okay. Resistance ends eventually." That night, Carson had his first dream. He was underground, surrounded by walls of copper that pulsed like a heartbeat. The metal was alive, growing, spreading through the rock. And at the center, something vast and impossible. Not Prince, but what Prince had become, or maybe always was. A consciousness distributed through miles of wire. Hundreds of modified bodies. The entire underground network. He woke to find thin copper wires growing from his pillow, reaching for his head. Carson reported the incident immediately. Dr. Kim examined him, finding trace amounts of copper sulfate in his blood, levels that shouldn't be there. "You've been exposed," she said. "Something in that mine, maybe airborne, maybe through microabrasions. Your body is fighting it, but what?" I've tested everyone who went into those tunnels. You all have elevated copper levels, and they're increasing. The task force tried everything. They pumped concrete into the tunnels, only to find new openings appearing overnight. They tried poison gas, but the modified people didn't need to breathe. They even discussed more extreme measures: fuel air explosives, tactical nuclear weapons, but the tunnel system was too vast, too close to populated areas. Then came the morning when everything changed. Carson woke to find the command post empty, except for Sheriff Hawkins, who was standing at the window, staring at the desert. "They're gone," she said. "Everyone who went into the tunnels. Martinez, all of them, left in the night. To where? Where do you think?" Carson looked out the window. In the distance, the ghost towns were glowing with that blue-green light. But now, it wasn't just isolated points. The glow was spreading, connecting, forming a network across the desert. "It's starting," Hawkins said. "The real transformation, not just people, everything, the land itself." She turned to Carson, and he saw thin copper wires growing from the corners of her eyes. "I can hear him," she whispered. "Prince, or what he's become. He's in my head, showing me things, the future. It's beautiful and terrible. Sheriff, we need to get you to medical." "No." She pulled her service weapon. "I won't become one of them. I won't be used to hurt people." "Sheriff, please. Run, Carson. Get as far from here as you can. Tell them to nuke the whole area if they have to. Don't let it spread." The gunshot echoed across the desert. Carson ran. He drove north as fast as he could, but he could feel it. The copper in his blood calling him back. Every mile was agony, fighting against the pull. He made it to Phoenix before collapsing. When he woke in the hospital, officials in hazmat suits were questioning him. He told them everything, showed them the thin copper wires that were now growing from his fingernails. They isolated him, studied him, tried to find a cure. But there was no cure. The transformation could be slowed, but not stopped. The official response was swift and brutal. The entire region was quarantined. The military moved in with flamethrowers and white phosphorus, burning everything. They claimed it worked, that the threat was contained. But Carson knew better. In his isolation room, he could feel them. The network, the modified people, Prince's distributed consciousness. They weren't gone. They had just gone deeper, spreading through underground aquifers, following veins of copper ore that stretched across the continent. Sometimes, late at night, Carson heard the singing. Not with his ears, but in his bones, in the copper that was slowly replacing his blood. The prince rises, the prince calls, copper kingdom, copper thralls. He tried to warn them. The copper deposits in Arizona were connected to deposits in New Mexico, Utah, Nevada. The network could spread anywhere there was copper in the earth. And copper was everywhere. They didn't listen. Or maybe they did, but it was already too late. Carson's last journal entry, found after his room was discovered empty, the window sealed from the inside, thin copper wires growing from the walls. I understand now. Prince didn't find something in that mine. Something found him. Something that's been waiting in the earth since before humans walked upright. We thought we were mining copper. But maybe the copper was mining us. I can feel myself changing. My thoughts aren't entirely my own anymore. Sometimes I see through other eyes, hundreds of them, all connected, all part of the same vast organism. We're becoming something new. Not human, not machine, but something in between. They'll try to stop it. They'll fail. You can't fight geology. You can't kill what's part of the earth itself. The transformation isn't an invasion. It's an evolution. and evolution doesn't ask permission. I'm going below now. The others are calling. We have work to do. The Copper Prince has such wonders to show us, such terrible wonders. If you find this, don't come looking for me. I'm not Carson Wells anymore. I'm part of something larger, older, hungrier. The earth is patient. The earth endures. And now, so do we. Welcome to the Copper Kingdom. Population growing. The room where Carson had been held is still sealed. Sometimes maintenance workers report hearing singing from inside. The walls have been X-rayed, revealing an intricate network of copper wire growing through the concrete, spreading inch by inch, year by year. The official report lists Carson Wells as deceased, one of 37 casualties of a chemical leak at an abandoned mine. The ghost towns of southern Arizona remain off-limits, surrounded by chain-link fence and warning signs. But sometimes, hikers in the remote desert report strange sights, figures that move with jerky motions, lights in abandoned places, and always, always the singing that seems to come from the earth itself. The first call came in at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday night in September. Deputy Shane Brennan was patrolling the remote highways of Cochise County when dispatch crackled through his radio. Unit 23, we have a reported disturbance at the Buckhorn Ranch, Highway 80, mile marker 47. Neighbor reports gunshots and screaming. Shane knew the Buckhorn Ranch. 1,500 acres of scrub desert and cattle land, owned by the Patterson family for 3 generations. Remote didn't begin to describe it. The nearest neighbor was 6 miles away, the town of Bisbee, a full 40-minute drive. Unit 23 responding, Shane said, turning his patrol car around. ETA 20 minutes. Be advised, caller says multiple shots fired. Backup is en route, but they're 40 minutes out. Shane pressed harder on the accelerator. The desert highway was empty, his headlights cutting through the darkness. The Buckhorn Ranch had always been trouble. Family disputes, property line arguments, water rights battles. Tom Patterson, the current patriarch, was known for his temper and his gun collection. The ranch entrance was marked by a rusted metal arch with Buckhorn spelled out in welded letters. Shane's headlights swept across the dirt road leading to the main house, illuminating fresh tire tracks. Multiple vehicles had been here recently. He stopped his patrol car 100 yards from the house, grabbing his radio. Dispatch, I'm on scene. Main house is dark, no visible activity. 3 vehicles in the driveway. Tom Patterson's truck, looks like his son Mitchell's Jeep, and a sedan I don't recognize. Roger that. Unit 23. Backup is still 30 minutes out. Shane drew his weapon and approached on foot. The desert silence was absolute. No insects, no wind, nothing. Then he smelled it. Gunpowder and something else. Blood. The front door of the ranch house was open, hanging off one hinge. Shane's flashlight revealed bullet holes in the doorframe, spent casings on the porch. "Sheriff's Department," he called. "Anyone inside?" No response. Shane entered, weapon raised. The living room was destroyed. Furniture overturned, family photos shattered on the floor, blood splattered on the walls. But no bodies. He cleared the room and moved deeper into the house. The kitchen showed signs of a struggle. Broken dishes, a knife stuck in the wall, more blood. The blood trail led toward the back of the house. In the hallway, Shane found the first body. Tom Patterson, 63, patriarch of the Buckhorn Ranch. He'd been shot multiple times, his hunting rifle still clutched in his hands. Defensive wounds on his arms suggested he'd fought back. Shane checked for a pulse, knowing he wouldn't find one. Tom had been dead for at least an hour. he continued following the blood trail to the master bedroom. Tom's wife, Linda, 59, was on the floor beside the bed. Single gunshot to the head, execution style. The wall safe behind a painting was open and empty. Dispatch: I have 2 deceased at the Buckhorn Ranch, Tom and Linda Patterson. Multiple gunshots. Possible robbery gone wrong. Copy that, Unit 23. Backup is 20 minutes out. Shane heard something. A whimper, barely audible. He followed the sound to a closet. Inside, crammed behind hanging clothes, was a teenage girl, Ashley Patterson, Tom's 14-year-old granddaughter. She was covered in blood, eyes wide with terror, a kitchen knife clutched in her hands. "Ashley, it's Deputy Brennan. You're safe now." She didn't respond, just stared at him with those terrified eyes. "Ashley, are you hurt?" She shook her head slightly. "Is anyone else in the house?" She nodded, then pointed up. The attic. Shane helped Ashley out of the closet, noting that the blood on her didn't seem to be hers. "Stay here. Don't move." He found the attic access in the hallway ceiling. The pull-down ladder was already extended. Shane climbed carefully, flashlight in one hand, weapon in the other. The attic was a finished space, used for storage. Behind a stack of boxes, he found 2 more bodies. Mitchell Patterson, Tom's 35-year-old son, and his wife Brooke, 32. Both shot multiple times. Mitchell had a pistol in his hand, empty, but there was something else, written on the wall in what looked like blood. They knew. Shane photographed everything, then climbed back down. Ashley was where he'd left her, still clutching the knife. "Ashley, I need you to talk to me. Who did this?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "Shock, probably. Was it someone you know?" She nodded. "Family?" Another nod, more emphatic. Shane felt his blood run cold. "Who else is supposed to be here tonight?" Ashley held up 3 fingers. "3 more people?" She nodded, then pointed toward the back of the property. Shane knew who she meant. Tom's other son, Blake, lived in a trailer on the far side of the ranch with his girlfriend Crystal and her son from a previous relationship. A troubled kid named Kyle. Are they the ones who did this? Ashley's nod was barely perceptible. "Dispatch, I need that backup now. Possible suspects still on property. Armed and dangerous." "Copy that, Unit 23. Units are 10 minutes out." 10 minutes was too long. Shane made a decision. "Ashley, I need you to hide. Lock yourself in the bathroom and don't come out until I or another deputy tells you it's safe. Understand?" She nodded and scurried to the bathroom, locking the door behind her. Shane exited through the back door, moving carefully across the property. The trailer was about 300 yards away, lights on, music playing. As he approached, he could hear voices, arguing. Said there was more. A woman's voice, Crystal. "There is more, but it's in the damn bank." Blake's voice slurred. Drunk or high, maybe both. "Then we're screwed. We killed them for nothing." "Shut up. Let me think." Shane called for backup to go silent, then positioned himself behind Blake's truck. Through the trailer window, he could see 3 figures moving around inside. Blake, Crystal, and Kyle. Then he saw something that made his stomach turn. On the table inside the trailer were bags of what looked like methamphetamine, scales, packaging materials. This wasn't just about family money. The Pattersons had discovered Blake's drug operation. A door slammed. Kyle, the teenager, had stepped outside, lighting a cigarette. He had a pistol tucked in his waistband. Shane had to act. "Sheriff's Department." "Hands where I can see them." Kyle spun, reaching for the gun. "Don't do it." "Hands up." The kid was fast. The pistol was halfway out when Shane fired. Kyle went down, clutching his shoulder, the gun falling from his hand. The trailer door burst open. Blake came out shooting, a semi-automatic rifle spraying bullets. Shane dove behind the truck as windows shattered above him. "You killed my family, Blake," Shane shouted. "It's over." "They were going to destroy everything," Blake screamed. "Turn me in. Take the ranch. They chose the land over their own blood." More gunfire. Shane could hear sirens in the distance. Backup finally arriving. Crystal appeared at the trailer window with a shotgun. Shane barely got behind cover before she fired, pellets peppering the truck. "Give up," Shane called. "You're surrounded. Go to hell." But the sirens were getting closer. Blake and Crystal must have heard them too. There was sudden silence from the trailer. "Blake? Crystal? Come out with your hands up." Nothing. Then 2 gunshots from inside the trailer. A pause, then a third. Shane waited until backup arrived. 4 units, lights blazing. They approached the trailer in formation. Shane entered first, weapon raised. Blake and Crystal were on the floor, both with gunshot wounds to the head. Murder-suicide, it looked like. Blake still had the rifle in his hand, but something was wrong. The angles were off. The blood spatter didn't match a self-inflicted wound. "Check on the kid," Shane told another deputy. Kyle was gone. A blood trail led from where he'd fallen toward the desert. They'd lost him in the darkness. Back at the main house, Ashley was safe but still unable to speak. The crime scene investigators arrived, along with Sheriff Carl Rodriguez. The scene was processed through the night and into the next day. The official story came together. Blake Patterson had been running a meth operation from his trailer on the family ranch. When his father Tom discovered it, he threatened to turn Blake in and cut him out of the will. Blake, along with Crystal and Kyle, had come to the main house to convince Tom otherwise. When that failed, violence erupted, but Shane couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The blood message, "they knew," didn't fit. And Ashley's behavior suggested she'd seen something more. 3 days later, Shane was reviewing the evidence when he noticed something in the crime scene photos. In the attic, partially hidden behind Mitchell's body, was a cell phone. It had been recording. The video was dark, shaky, but the audio was clear. Mitchell and Brooke had hidden in the attic when the shooting started. They'd called 911, but the remote location meant help was too far away. On the recording, Shane could hear Tom arguing with someone downstairs, but it wasn't Blake's voice. It was younger. "Kyle, you don't understand," Kyle was saying. "This family owes us. My mom and Blake, they deserve their share. Get out of my house." Tom's voice, firm but controlled. "Not without what we came for. I said get out." Then gunshots, Linda's scream, more shots. Blake's voice then, "Kyle, what the hell did you do? What you were too chicken shit to do yourself." The recording continued. Mitchell whispering to Brooke, telling her to stay quiet. Footsteps on the stairs, the attic ladder creaking. Kyle's voice, "Found you." Mitchell, "Kyle, stop. Think about what you're doing." I am thinking. No witnesses. The gunshots were deafening on the recording. Then Kyle's voice again, calm, emotionless. "Blake, Crystal, get up here. Help me stage this." Blake's voice panicked. "We need to get out of here." "No, we make it look like you two did it, then killed yourselves. I was never here." Crystal, "That's insane. You want to go to prison? Because that's what happens if we don't control the narrative." The recording cut out there, the phone's memory full. Shane immediately called Sheriff Rodriguez. They had evidence that Kyle was the primary shooter, that Blake and Crystal were likely murdered to cover it up. An APB was issued for Kyle Hoffman, 17 years old, armed and extremely dangerous. but Kyle had vanished. His blood trail led into the desert, but search teams with dogs lost the scent after a mile. It was like he'd evaporated. Shane interviewed Ashley again, this time with a child psychologist present. Slowly, through drawings and written words, she told her story. Kyle had always been strange. He'd killed animals on the ranch, threatened her if she told anyone. Blake and Crystal were too high most of the time to notice or care. The night of the murders, Kyle had come to the main house alone first. Ashley had hidden when she heard him arguing with her grandfather. The shootings started in the living room. Tom fought back, but Kyle was prepared. Linda tried to run but didn't make it. Mitchell and Brooke hid in the attic, but Kyle found them. Blake and Crystal arrived after it was already over, horrified at what Kyle had done. Ashley had watched from her hiding spot as Kyle forced Blake to help move the bodies, to stage the scene. Then, in the trailer, Kyle shot them both and tried to make it look like a murder-suicide. But Shane had arrived before he could finish staging the scene. The manhunt for Kyle intensified. His photo was on every news channel, every social media platform. Tips came in from across the Southwest, but none panned out. 2 weeks later, a rancher near the Mexican border reported someone stealing supplies from his barn. The description matched Kyle. Border Patrol was alerted, but by the time they responded, he was gone. Then the letters started arriving. The first one came to the sheriff's office, addressed to Shane. Deputy Brennan, you think you know what happened at the Buckhorn Ranch. You don't. That family was poison. Tom Patterson was a monster who beat his wife and kids. Mitchell was a coward who let it happen. Blake was weak. Crystal was greedy. They all deserved what they got. Ashley knows the truth. Ask her about the bruises. Ask her about the locked doors. Ask her about what her grandfather really did in that house. I'm not a killer. I'm justice. Kay Shane investigated the allegations. There were no records of abuse, no reports to CPS. But when he pressed, neighbors admitted they'd heard things. Seen bruises on Linda. Noticed how the kids flinched when Tom raised his voice. Ashley, through her therapist, gradually revealed more. Tom had been abusive, controlling. The ranch was a prison. Blake's drug dealing was his escape. Mitchell tried to protect everyone but couldn't stand up to his father. But that didn't justify murder. Shane continued tracking Kyle, following leads that took him across Arizona and into New Mexico. Always a step behind. 3 months after the murders, another letter arrived. Deputy, you're still looking in the wrong places. I'm not running, I'm hunting. There are other families like the Pattersons. Other ranches where terrible things happen behind closed doors. The law doesn't help. CPS doesn't help. Someone has to. Check the news in Luna County, New Mexico. The Morrison Ranch. Tell me they didn't deserve it. Kay Shane checked. The Morrison Ranch. A father and 2 sons dead, shot in their home. The wife and daughter survived. Told police that a young man had saved them from years of abuse. The killer was never caught. The pattern continued. Every few months, another remote ranch, another family with a history of hidden abuse, another massacre where the abusers died and the victims survived. The killer was always described the same way. Young, calm, methodical. Kyle had become something else. Not just a murderer, but a self-appointed executioner traveling the Southwest, targeting families he deemed deserving of death. Shane kept investigating, building a profile. Kyle was choosing his targets carefully, studying them for weeks before striking. He was funding his travels by stealing from his victims. Cash, valuables, never enough to live well, just enough to survive and move on. A year after the Buckhorn Ranch massacre, Shane got a call from a number he didn't recognize. Deputy Brennan? Shane recognized the voice immediately. Kyle. I wanted you to know I never meant for Blake and Crystal to die. That was messy. I've gotten better since then. Turn yourself in, Kyle. This has to stop. Does it? How many kids are being beaten right now while we're talking? How many wives are hiding bruises? The system doesn't work, Deputy. I'm the system now. You're a killer. I'm a survivor. And I'm making sure others survive too. Where are you, Kyle? Closer than you think. Did you know Sheriff Rodriguez beats his wife? Shane's blood ran cold. That's not true. Check her medical records. 3 falls in the last year. Broken ribs, concussion, fractured wrist. Ask yourself, Deputy, if it was true, what would you do? Report it? Who would believe you? Or would you handle it yourself? The line went dead. Shane did check, using his access to dig into hospital records. Rodriguez's wife, Maria, did have those injuries. The explanations were plausible. But the pattern... He confronted Rodriguez privately, carefully. The sheriff's reaction... Instant rage, threats. Told Shane everything he needed to know. But Kyle was right. Who would believe a deputy over a sheriff? 2 nights later, Sheriff Rodriguez was found dead in his home. Single gunshot to the head, made to look like suicide. A note confessing to years of abuse. Maria Rodriguez was found locked in a bedroom, beaten but alive. Shane knew it was Kyle. The staging was too perfect, the note too convenient. But Maria wouldn't cooperate with the investigation. She insisted it was suicide, that her husband had finally shown remorse. Shane became obsessed with catching Kyle. But part of him, a part he hated, understood. The system was broken. The remote ranches of the Southwest were kingdoms where patriarchs ruled with impunity. Law enforcement was spread too thin, too connected to the communities they served. More deaths followed. Always remote ranches. Always families with hidden histories of abuse. Always the abusers dead, the victims spared. Kyle had become a ghost story, a legend whispered about in small towns and truck stops. El Justiciero, they called him in the border towns, the executioner. Shane tracked him for 3 years. Always close, never close enough. He studied the patterns, tried to predict the next target. But Kyle was smart, random in his timing if not his selection. Then Ashley Patterson contacted Shane. Now 17, she'd found her voice through years of therapy. He called me, she said. Kyle. He wanted to know if I was okay. When? Last week. He said he was sorry about my parents, but not about my grandfather. He said he's tired. He wants to stop but doesn't know how. Did he say where he was? No, but he mentioned the Salvation Mountains. Something about finding peace in the Painted Desert. The Salvation Mountains, an art installation in the California desert near the Salton Sea. Shane drove there alone, off duty, carrying a letter Ashley had written for Kyle. He found Kyle living in an abandoned trailer near Slab City, the lawless community in the desert. He was 20 now, gaunt, scarred, nothing like the teenager who'd fled the Buckhorn Ranch. Deputy Brennan, Kyle said, no surprise in his voice. Took you long enough? It's over, Kyle. Is it? There's a ranch in Imperial County. The father brands his kids. Actually brands them like cattle. Tell me he doesn't deserve what's coming. That's not for you to decide. Then who? You? The system that lets it happen? Shane handed him Ashley's letter. Kyle read it, tears forming in his eyes. In it, Ashley forgave him for her parents' deaths but begged him to stop, to find another way. She's the only pure thing left from that night, Kyle said. I see their faces, you know. All of them. even the ones who deserved it. Then stop. Turn yourself in. Prison? Death penalty? That's your solution? It's justice. No, it's law. There's a difference. They sat in silence in the desert heat. Finally, Kyle spoke again. I'll make you a deal. I'll disappear, really disappear, no more killings. But you have to promise me something. What? Check on the families, the remote ranches, the places where no one's watching. Be the system I couldn't trust. Shane wanted to arrest him, to bring him in, to close the case. But he thought about Sheriff Rodriguez, about all the hidden abuse Kyle had uncovered, about Ashley's letter. I can't let you go. You can't stop me either. I've got a rifle trained on you right now. Motion sensor trigger. You move toward me, we both die. Shane looked around, spotted the setup. Ingenious, paranoid, effective. This is the only deal you get, Deputy. I disappear, the killings stop, but you become what the system should be. Or I keep going, and more people die. Your choice. Shane made his choice. He stood up, walked away, and never looked back. Kyle Hoffman vanished that day. No more ranch massacres, no more vigilante executions. Shane kept his promise, investigating abuse reports, checking on remote families, being the oversight the system lacked. But sometimes Shane wondered if Kyle had really stopped. When an abusive rancher died in a suspicious accident, when a wife-beater disappeared in the desert, when a child molester was found dead in his cell, was it coincidence or was Kyle still out there, more careful, more selective, but still executing his version of justice? Shane never found out. He never looked too hard. Some ghosts are better left undisturbed. The Buckhorn Ranch still stands empty, a monument to the night when family secrets and vigilante justice collided in blood. Ashley Patterson lives with relatives in California now, studying to become a therapist, helping other survivors of family violence. She still has nightmares about that night, but sometimes, she admits, she dreams about Kyle too. Not the killer he became, but the broken boy who thought he was saving her. She wonders if, in his twisted way, maybe he did. Deputy Tiffany Walsh had been with the Cochise County Sheriff's Office for 8 years, all of them spent patrolling the harsh borderlands where Arizona meets Mexico. She'd seen her share of trafficking, both drugs and human, but nothing had prepared her for what she'd find in Skeleton Canyon on that moonless October night. The call came in at 2:15 a.m. from a Border Patrol checkpoint 20 miles east of Douglas. The voice on the radio was Jackson Torres, a veteran agent she'd worked with dozens of times before, but tonight his usually steady voice carried an edge of panic. Sheriff's Department, we need backup at Skeleton Canyon. Our sensors picked up a large group crossing, maybe 30 individuals. We pursued, but something's wrong. Define wrong, Tiffany responded, already turning her patrol vehicle toward the canyon, the speedometer climbing past 70 on the empty desert highway. We found their guide, what's left of him, and Deputy, there's something else. The people we're tracking, they're not moving like normal crossers. They're too organized, too fast, and the sounds they're making. The transmission cut to static. Tiffany tried to raise Jackson again but got no response. She pushed the accelerator harder, her patrol car's engine roaring through the night. Skeleton Canyon had earned its name honestly. In the 1880s, it had been the site of numerous massacres. Mexican smugglers ambushed by American bandits, leaving bones scattered across the canyon floor. The place had been cursed in local legend ever since. Even now, over a century later, hikers occasionally found human remains bleached white by the desert sun. The cartels usually avoided it, preferring easier routes despite the canyon's strategic advantages. But desperate times called for desperate measures, and the recent crackdown on traditional smuggling routes had pushed operations into places even the criminals feared. 20 minutes later, Tiffany arrived at the canyon entrance. 3 Border Patrol vehicles sat abandoned, engines still running, doors open. Jackson's truck was among them. Her hand moved instinctively to her sidearm as she called it in. "Dispatch, I'm at Skeleton Canyon. 3 Border Patrol units abandoned, no sign of agents. Requesting immediate backup." "Copy that, Unit 14. Backup is 40 minutes out." 40 minutes. Too long. Jackson and his team could be dying in there. Tiffany grabbed her tactical gear, vest, rifle, extra magazines, first aid kit, and her grandfather's knife. A wicked 8-inch blade he'd carried in Vietnam. She'd never had to use it on duty, but something about tonight made her clip it to her belt. The beam of her tactical flashlight cut through the darkness as she entered the canyon. The first thing she noticed was the silence. The Sonoran Desert was never truly quiet. There were always insects and nightbirds, the rustle of small mammals. But here, nothing. Even the wind seemed to avoid this place. 50 yards in, she found the first blood. A spray pattern on the canyon wall, too high to be from a normal wound. Arterial spray, but from someone who'd been lifted off the ground when it happened. Her light followed the blood trail down to a dark pool in the sand. No body. "Jackson," she called out, her voice echoing off the canyon walls. "Torres, you out here?" A sound answered her. Not a voice, but something between a laugh and a sob, coming from deeper in the canyon. She followed it, weapon raised, every nerve on edge. The canyon narrowed, walls rising 30 feet on either side. Ancient petroglyphs covered the rock face here, symbols from long-dead peoples who'd inhabited this land before European contact. But among the old symbols were new ones, carved recently. They hurt to look at, geometric patterns that seemed to move in her peripheral vision. Another 100 yards, and she found the guide. He'd been torn apart, literally. Arms ripped from sockets, chest cavity opened, organs missing. But the wounds weren't from animals. The tears were too precise, too deliberate. His face was frozen in an expression of absolute terror, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. Around his body, arranged in a perfect circle, were his removed organs: heart, liver, kidneys, all placed with ritualistic precision. But that wasn't the worst part. Carved into his chest, in letters that still wept blood, was a message. "The door opens." Tiffany photographed everything, then noticed the tracks. Dozens of footprints, all bare feet. But they were wrong. Too deep, like each person weighed twice what they should. And the gait pattern was inhuman, the space between steps too long. Some of the prints showed what looked like claws instead of toes. A scream echoed through the canyon, human, agonized, cut short. It came from the direction of the old copper mines that riddled the canyon's deeper sections. Tiffany ran toward it, all thoughts of waiting for backup forgotten. She found Jackson Torres outside a mine entrance, or what was left of him. He was still alive, barely, propped against a rock. His tactical gear was shredded, 4 parallel gashes across his chest that looked like claw marks. His eyes found hers, wide with terror and something else, knowledge of something too horrible to process. "Tiffany," he gasped, blood bubbling from his lips. Don't go in there. They're not human anymore." "Who? The Crossers?" "Changed. All changed. The coyote, Carlos, he made a deal, fed them something. He coughed, spraying blood. "They're becoming something else. And there's something in the mine. Ancient. Hungry. It's been waiting. Jackson, stay with me. Help's coming." He grabbed her arm with surprising strength. "No, you have to stop them. They're heading for Douglas. 30 of them, maybe more, if they reach the town." His grip loosened, eyes losing focus. "The children. It wants the children." Jackson Torres died with a rattling breath that seemed to echo through the canyon. Tiffany closed his eyes, then stood, checking her ammunition. 6 magazines for the rifle, 3 for her Glock. Against 30 of whatever had killed Jackson, it wouldn't be enough. But she couldn't wait for backup. Not if they were heading for Douglas, a town of 15,000 people. She entered the mine. The tunnel was older than any mining operation should have created. The walls were too smooth, carved rather than blasted. Her light revealed more of those moving symbols, and words in Spanish, English, and languages she didn't recognize. But one phrase appeared over and over: "Feed the sleeper." Deeper in, she heard singing. Multiple voices in perfect harmony. The melody unlike anything she'd heard before. It was beautiful and terrible, making her teeth ache and her vision blur. She followed it through a maze of tunnels that shouldn't exist. Passages that seemed to double back on themselves yet always led deeper. Then she entered a vast chamber and stopped dead. 30 people stood in a circle, maybe more, all in the filthy clothes typical of border crossers. Men, women, children, all perfectly still, singing that impossible song. But they weren't human anymore. Their bodies had been changed. Elongated limbs, fingers that ended in black claws, mouths that opened too wide. Their eyes reflected her flashlight like a cat's, but the color was wrong, deep red like fresh blood. In the center of the circle was Carlos El Coyote Mendoza, one of the most successful human traffickers in the Sonoran Desert. But something was catastrophically wrong with him. His body had been transformed into something massive, 8 feet tall at least, muscles rippling under skin that looked more like leather than flesh. Extra arms had sprouted from his torso, 6 in total, each ending in hands that were too long, too jointed. His face was the worst part, still recognizably human but stretched, distorted, with a mouth that split his head nearly in half. And behind him, painted on the chamber wall in what looked like fresh blood, was a massive symbol that made Tiffany's eyes water to look at. It seemed to pulse with its own light, and she realized with growing horror that it was moving, rotating slowly like a door handle turning. "Another one comes," Carlos said, his voice a harmony of tones that shouldn't come from a single throat. "Good. The sleeper needs more, always more." The circle of transformed people turned to face her, moving in perfect synchronization. Up close, she could see the details of their transformation. Bone spurs erupted from their spines. Their skin had a scaled texture. Some had developed what looked like gills on their necks. All of them smiled with too many teeth. "Deputy Walsh," Carlos continued, taking a step forward that covered 10 feet. "I know you. You arrested my cousin last year. He died in your jail. He hung himself, Carlos. He was looking at 20 years. No matter. He serves the sleeper now, as you will." He gestured to the symbol on the wall. "Do you know what this place is? Why the canyon has always been soaked in blood?" Tiffany kept her rifle raised, though she knew it was useless. "Enlighten me." "It's a wound. A place where our world touches another. The conquistadors knew it. The Apache knew it. They fed it blood to keep it closed. But the blood also feeds what's on the other side. And I've been feeding it so much these past months. Every crosser who didn't make it. Every rival gang member. Every border patrol agent who got too close. All food for the sleeper." "You're insane." "Am I?" Carlos laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "I was dying, Deputy. Cancer, eating me from the inside. The doctors gave me 3 months, but then I found the old books in a dead smuggler's pack. Instructions, rituals, promises of power and immortality. All I had to do was open the door." The symbol on the wall pulsed brighter. Through it, Tiffany could see something. A vast darkness that moved, that breathed, that watched with intelligence older than human civilization. "It spoke to me," Carlos continued. "Showed me what I could become, what we all could become, the next evolution. No more weak flesh, no more death, just endless hunger and endless feeding." "These people didn't choose this," Tiffany said, indicating the transformed crossers. "You forced it on them. They paid for passage to a new life. I gave them exactly that." He smiled, his mouth opening impossibly wide. Just not the life they expected. One of the transformed, a woman who might have been 30 or 60, it was impossible to tell now, stepped forward. When she spoke, her voice was like wind through broken glass. "The change is ecstasy," she said. "We are free from fear, from pain, from human weakness. We are becoming divine. You're becoming monsters. Monster, divine. These are human words for things beyond human understanding." The woman's head tilted at an impossible angle. "The sleeper dreams of a world remade, where the strong consume the weak, where flesh is clay to be reshaped, where the border between life and death dissolves." More of them began to speak, each voice adding to a horrible chorus. "We are the first." The door opens wider with each feeding. Soon the sleeper will wake fully. And when it does, this world will drown in beautiful darkness. Tiffany backed toward the tunnel entrance but found it blocked. More transformed people had entered behind her. She recognized some of them. Border Patrol agents who'd gone missing over the past months, their uniforms hanging in tatters from their changed bodies. Among them was Maria Santos, an agent she'd known for 5 years. Maria's face was still recognizable, but her body had been elongated, stretched like taffy, arms reaching nearly to the ground. "Tiffany," Maria said, her voice still carrying a trace of her former self, "don't fight it. The change, it's freedom. No more watching people die in the desert. No more choosing between law and compassion. Just purpose, pure, simple purpose. What purpose? To feed, to grow, to spread." Maria's 2 long arms reached toward her. "Let us show you." Tiffany fired 3 rounds into Maria's center mass. The transformed agent jerked but didn't fall. Black ichor leaked from the wounds, but they began closing almost immediately. "Bullets," Carlos laughed, still thinking like a human. The circle began to close. Tiffany switched to full auto, spraying the crowd. They jerked and danced as bullets tore through them, but none fell. The black fluid that leaked from their wounds seemed to move with purpose, crawling back into their bodies. Her rifle clicked empty. She drew her Glock, knowing it was useless. The transformed people were almost on her when she remembered her grandfather's knife. On instinct, she drew it and slashed at the nearest attacker. The blade connected with a transformed man's reaching arm. Where it cut, the flesh didn't just part, it burned. The man shrieked, pulling back, smoke rising from the wound. The others hesitated. Tiffany looked at the knife. It was nothing special, just military surplus steel. But it had been blessed by her grandmother, a devout Catholic who'd insisted on having Father Martinez bless all of her grandfather's war souvenirs when he'd returned from Vietnam. "Blessed blade," Carlos hissed. "Old magic. But one knife won't save you." He was right. But it might buy her time. Tiffany slashed at the air, keeping the transformed at bay as she backed toward a side tunnel she'd noticed earlier. They followed but maintained their distance, respect for the blade evident in their inhuman eyes. The tunnel was narrow, forcing them to come at her one or two at a time. She kept the knife moving, occasionally connecting with reaching claws or grasping hands. Each cut brought shrieks of pain and the smell of burning flesh. But she was being herded. She realized it too late. The tunnel opened into another chamber, smaller than the first but somehow worse. The walls were covered in cocoons made of that black ichor, each one containing a human form in various stages of transformation. Some were still recognizably human, beating against their prisons. Others had changed so much they looked more like enormous insects or deep-sea creatures. At the center of the room was a pool of black liquid, bubbling despite no visible heat source. And rising from it was something that shouldn't exist. A creature that was part human, part insect, part machine. Its body was segmented like a centipede's, but each segment had human arms and faces embedded in it. Dozens of faces, all screaming silently. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Carlos said from behind her. "My first success." 23 people merged into one glorious organism. It will be the sleeper's herald when the door fully opens. The thing in the pool turned toward Tiffany. All its faces focused on her, and when it spoke, it was with 23 voices in perfect unison. "Join us. Become us. Feed the sleeper. Go to hell." "Hell?" Carlos laughed. "This is hell, deputy, and heaven, and everything in between. The sleeper's realm has no human concepts of punishment or reward, only hunger and the feeding thereof." The creature began pulling itself from the pool. Its movement was obscene, segments rippling, human arms pulling it forward while others reached toward her. Tiffany slashed with the knife, severing several arms, but more kept coming. She ran deeper into the caves, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind her. The tunnels branched and twisted, some natural, others clearly carved by tools that predated modern equipment. She passed more chambers filled with horrors, walls of fused human bodies, still alive and moaning. Pools of that black ichor with things growing in them that looked like human/plant hybrids. Rooms where the transformed were performing surgery on screaming victims, adding or removing parts seemingly at random. Then she found the heart of it all. The chamber was vast, so large her flashlight couldn't find the far walls. In the center was a pit that seemed to go down forever, and from it rose a presence that her mind couldn't fully process. It wasn't visible in any normal sense, but she could feel it. Ancient, vast, hungry, beyond measure. The sleeper. Around the pit, arranged in concentric circles, were hundreds of bodies. Some were ancient. Mummified remains in Spanish armor, Native American garb, Old West clothing. Others were fresh. People who disappeared in recent months. All were connected by veins of that black ichor, creating a vast network with the pit at its center. Standing at the edge of the pit was a figure Tiffany recognized from missing person reports. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a biochemist who'd vanished from the University of Arizona 6 months ago. But she'd been transformed more thoroughly than the others. Her body was now translucent, showing internal organs that pulsed with black fluid. Her head had split open like a flower, revealing a brain that had grown far beyond human proportions. "Deputy Walsh," Dr. Vasquez said, her voice coming from no visible mouth. "How wonderful. An observer for the final phase." Final phase of what? The opening, of course. Carlos was just a tool, a crude instrument to gather the necessary biomass. But I understand the science. The sleeper isn't from another dimension or some hell. It's from outside our universe entirely, a place where the laws of physics are suggestions, where flesh and energy and thought are all the same substance. You're talking about an alien invasion? Invasion implies conflict. This is more like digestion. Your universe is being absorbed, transformed into something more useful to the sleeper's kind. Earth is just the entry point, the weakest spot in reality's fabric. And this canyon, with its history of death, its geological instabilities, its unique mineral compositions, it's the perfect place to begin. The pit began to glow with that impossible light Tiffany had seen through the symbol. Something was rising from its depths. 30 more minutes, Doctor, Vasquez continued. That's all we need. The transformation of the initial subjects is complete. They'll spread through Douglas first, changing everyone they encounter. Within a week, all of southern Arizona. Within a month, the continent. The sleeper's influence will spread through every living thing, remaking your world into something better. Better? You're talking about the end of humanity. The end of humanity as you know it. But imagine, Deputy, no more death, no more disease, no more conflict between nations. All consciousness merged into one glorious whole, serving a single purpose. Slavery. Freedom. Freedom from choice, from doubt, from the burden of individuality. Tiffany heard them coming. Carlos and the transformed, surrounding the chamber. She was trapped. But as she looked around, she noticed something. The ancient bodies in the circles. The ones in armor and old clothing. They all had weapons. Swords, muskets, rifles from different eras. And many of those weapons showed signs of the same blessing her knife carried. Crosses etched into metal, holy symbols, Latin inscriptions. Others had fought this thing before. Others had tried to stop it. She ran to the nearest body, a conquistador whose armor was remarkably preserved. His sword was still in its sheath, the blade inscribed with prayers in Spanish. When she drew it, it felt warm in her hand, almost alive. Blessed weapons, Doctor, Vasquez observed. Yes, they've always been somewhat effective against the transformed flesh, but you can't stop what's coming with medieval superstition. Maybe not, Tiffany said, but I can try. She ran along the circle, gathering weapons. A Colt peacemaker with a cross carved in the grip. A Apache tomahawk with sacred symbols. A World War I bayonet with Hebrew inscriptions. Each one thrummed with power, with the faith of those who'd carried them. Carlos and the others entered the chamber, spreading out to surround her. The thing in the pool, the merged creature, dragged itself from another entrance. They were closing in from all sides. Kill her, Doctor, Vasquez commanded. Feed her to the sleeper. They charged. Tiffany fought like her grandfather had described fighting in the tunnels of Cu-Chi. Brutal, desperate, without thought for anything but the next second of survival. The blessed sword cut through transformed flesh like paper. The peacemaker's bullets, inscribed with prayers, actually dropped attackers. The tomahawk split skulls that had seemed indestructible. But there were too many. For every one she killed, 2 more took its place. And from the pit, something was definitely rising now. Tentacles of impossible size, covered in eyes and mouths, reaching for the chamber's ceiling. That's when she heard the helicopters. The ceiling exploded. Repelling lines dropped. Soldiers in full hazmat gear descended, firing weapons she didn't recognize. Things that shot beams of white light that turned the transformed to ash. Deputy Walsh, a voice called through a speaker. Colonel Mitchell, U.S. Army, we're here to extract you. The pit, she screamed. Something's coming out of the pit. The colonel saw it. The massive tentacles now fully emerged, each one the size of a subway car. Light it up, he commanded. The soldiers opened fire with everything they had. Conventional bullets, incendiary rounds, those white light weapons. The tentacles writhed, some retreating, but more kept coming. "We need bigger guns," the colonel said. Then, into his radio, "Broken arrow, broken arrow. Authorization code Zulu 77. Skeleton Canyon. Danger close. All units evacuate immediately." "You're going to nuke it?" Tiffany asked as a soldier clipped her to a repelling line. "Tactical strike," Mitchell said. "We've been monitoring this site for years. Hoped it would never come to this." They were hauled up through the blasted ceiling into a helicopter that immediately banked hard and accelerated away from the canyon. Through the window, Tiffany watched more helicopters lifting off, all fleeing at maximum speed. 2 minutes to impact, the pilot announced. Below, she could see the transformed pouring out of the mine entrances, running with inhuman speed toward Douglas. But also rising from the canyon was something vast, the sleeper itself, pulling its impossible bulk from the pit, a thing of tentacles and eyes and mouths that hurt to perceive directly. Then the missile hit. The explosion was smaller than she expected. Tactical nukes were designed for contained destruction. But the effect on the creature was immediate. It writhed, screamed, with a sound that shattered the helicopter's windows, then began to dissolve, pulled back into the collapsing pit. The canyon itself was collapsing, falling in on itself as the underground chambers were vaporized. The transformed who'd been fleeing were caught in the collapse, buried under millions of tons of rock. "Did we get it?" Tiffany asked. Colonel Mitchell was quiet for a moment. "We stopped it from fully emerging. But things like the sleeper, they don't die. They just go back to sleep. And there are others." "Others?" "Every border on Earth, Deputy. Every place where blood has been spilled for generations, where suffering has soaked into the ground. The sleepers feed on conflict, on human misery, and we've given them so much to feed on over the centuries." They landed at a military base Tiffany didn't recognize. Underground, from the look of it. She was led to a medical facility where doctors in hazmat suits examined her, took blood samples, ran tests she didn't understand. "You've been exposed," one doctor told her. "The ichor, the transformed blood, it's in your system. Not enough to change you, but enough that you'll never be quite the same." "What does that mean?" "You'll see things others don't. Sense when the boundaries are weak. You'll know when another sleeper is stirring." She was debriefed for days, shown satellite footage of other sites around the world. The Korean DMZ, the India-Pakistan border, the Gaza Strip, all showing similar energy signatures to what had been in Skeleton Canyon. "We need people like you," Colonel Mitchell told her. "People who have been exposed but retained their humanity. You can sense them, fight them in ways normal humans can't. You want me to join some kind of secret government monster hunting unit. Nothing so dramatic. Officially, you'll still be a sheriff's deputy. But when we detect activity, when another sleeper starts to wake, we'll call you. And if I say no, then you go back to your regular patrols, knowing what you know, seeing what you'll see, unable to do anything about it." Tiffany thought about Jackson Torres, dead in the canyon, about Maria Santos, transformed into something inhuman, about the citizens of Douglas who'd nearly become food for an cosmic horror. "I'm in." That was 3 years ago. Since then, Tiffany had responded to 7 incidents. A call to New Mexico trying to wake something under the Trinity test site. Cartel tunnels in Texas that had broken through into older, darker passages. A mass disappearance at the California-Nevada border that turned out to be another transformation site. Each time she'd arrived with her blessed weapons. She'd collected quite an arsenal now. Each time they'd managed to stop the awakening, though never without casualties. Each time, the incidents were getting worse. the sleepers stirring more frequently. The official stories never mentioned the truth. Gas leaks, chemical spills, cartel violence. Comfortable lies for a population that couldn't handle the reality of what lurked beneath their feet. Tiffany still patrolled the Arizona borderlands, but now she knew what she was really guarding against. Not drug smugglers or illegal immigrants, but things far older and hungrier. She'd become a sentinel at the edge of reality, watching for signs that the boundaries were weakening again. Because they always weakened. The sleepers were patient, and human conflict fed them constantly. Every death in the desert, every drop of blood spilled in violence, added to their strength. Last week, she'd received new intelligence. Unusual activity at multiple sites simultaneously. The sleepers weren't just stirring individually anymore. They were communicating, coordinating, building towards something. The real invasion, Colonel Mitchell had told her in their last briefing, isn't aliens from space or armies from foreign nations. It's what we've been feeding with our violence all along. And we may have fed them too much to stop them this time. Tiffany cleaned her grandfather's knife, now her most trusted weapon. She checked the blessed ammunition for her peacemaker. She studied the maps showing the new hot zones. The next call would come soon. Another border, another awakening, another desperate fight to keep humanity from being transformed into something unrecognizable. And she'd answer, because someone had to stand watch at the places where worlds touched, where reality was thin, where hungry things waited for their moment. The war wasn't against other humans. It never had been. It was against the things humanity's violence had been feeding since the dawn of civilization. And it was a war they were slowly, inexorably losing. But Tiffany would keep fighting. Even knowing it was hopeless, even knowing the sleepers were inevitable, she'd keep fighting. Because that's what her grandfather had done in his war, what every guardian at every border throughout history had done. Hold the line, keep the darkness at bay for one more day, and hope that somehow, somewhere, someone would find a permanent solution before the sleepers fully woke and remade the world in their own impossible image. Her phone rang, Colonel Mitchell's number. Deputy Walsh, we have a situation. New Mexico border, Antelope Wells. Seismic activity suggesting a major emergence. How soon can you be there? 90 minutes. Good. And Deputy, this one's different. We're detecting multiple emergence points. It might be the big one. Tiffany strapped on her weapons, loaded her gear into her patrol car. The sun was setting over the desert, painting the mountains blood red. Somewhere out there, under the earth, ancient things were stirring. Time to go to work. The radio crackled as she drove toward New Mexico. Reports were coming in from all over. Missing persons, strange lights, unexplained seismic activity. Not just at the border, but inland too. Phoenix, Tucson, Albuquerque, El Paso. The emergence points were spreading. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When she opened it, her blood ran cold. It was a photo of Carlos Mendoza. Not dead in the collapsed canyon as they'd believed, but very much alive and even more transformed. His body had become something architectural, spreading across what looked like a massive underground chamber. And behind him, dozens of other transformed, all wearing the remnants of military uniforms. The text read, "You didn't kill us, Deputy. You freed us. The nuclear fire opened doors you can't imagine. We've been busy down here, building, growing, preparing. Tonight, the sleeper truly wakes. And this time, no blessed blade will save you." Tiffany pressed harder on the accelerator. In her rearview mirror, she could see lights rising from the desert floor. Not electric lights, but that impossible glow she'd seen in the canyon. The emergence had begun. Her radio exploded with panicked reports. Douglas is gone. The whole town just changed. Something massive moving under Tucson. The streets are collapsing. Border Patrol Station 7 isn't responding. Last transmission mentioned tentacles. Colonel Mitchell's voice cut through. All units, this is not a drill. Multiple sleeper emergence confirmed. Evacuate civilian populations where possible. Weapons free. May God help us all. Tiffany reached for her grandfather's knife, feeling its blessed weight. Through her windshield, she could see the horizon rippling like water. Reality itself was becoming unstable. The final war hadn't started with bombs or invasions. It had started with human cruelty, feeding things that should have stayed sleeping. And now the bill had come due. But Tiffany Walsh would meet it head-on, blessed blade in hand, standing at the border between worlds. Because that's what deputies did. They held the line. Even when the line was dissolving beneath their feet. Even when the darkness was winning. Even at the end of everything. The speedometer hit 100 as she raced toward Antelope Wells, toward whatever horror was emerging there. In the distance, something massive broke through the desert floor. A shape that shouldn't exist, couldn't exist, but did. The sleeper was awake, and the world would never be the same.